Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, out of the hospital, just starting my long year of rehab. It's going to be crazy, but Word Balloon will not be, affected as long as everything continues to go well. Everything's going in the right direction, and I'm eating better, and when I do finally reemerge and you'll see me on the convention scene, hopefully you will see a slimmer Word Balloon host. That's the intent. I've already lost 13 pounds. I'm very excited about that. I'm eating right. I'm taking the medications they're asking me to take and checking in with the doctors regularly as I get through this process. But don't worry. Thank you very much for your encouragement. Everyone who's written to me, encouraging words both on social media and emails as well. I really, really appreciate it. The League of Word Balloon listeners really stepped up and have given their support, and I truly appreciate that. Now, I'm in the midst of a bunch of episodes that I recorded before Christmas, figuring that people might be difficult to get during Christmas and New Year's. Today is one of those great episodes. It's Tom King. King is back for a new King speech. Great conversation. We certainly talk about the past Penguin arc that just wrapped up in Batman, and talk a bit about Kinghtmares. That's Night with a K. The current arc that Batman is going through. Now, when I talked, the first issue hadn't come out. There was that teaser at the end of the Penguin story that I thought would immediately follow into the next series of stories. But instead, we're on a bit of a fever dream with Batman in Kinghtmares. And Tom previews that as best as he can without giving out any details. But we've already had 2 issues of Kinghtmares, with the last one being Professor Pig. And it's been a very interesting story, and especially coming off the fevered nightmare dreams of Mr. Miracle and what he and Mitch Gerrits did for us for 12 issues. We talk about wrapping up that series. We also get into detail on Tom's work on Superman, which is available exclusively through the Walmart 100-page spectaculars. And Tom's doing those lead stories. I've read the first 7, and they're incredible. It's a Superman throughout the universe. It's excellent, and Tom goes into detail about how he interprets the story. Is it in continuity? Is it not in continuity? But there's some really great stories and great surprises from both an art standpoint and story standpoint. So we talk about that. Of course, Heroes in Crisis, another interesting puzzle of a story. What's going on there? Are the heroes and villains really dead? What is Sanctuary all about? We get into some of the mysteries of Heroes in Crisis in this conversation as well. But as always, a fun, breezy conversation with our buddy Tom King on today's Word Balloon. It's brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Again, thank you, League, for your support. Boy, I'll tell you, man, I feel like George Bailey every year around the holiday season, because so many people just, write in and say, hey, happy holidays, and just wish me well, and write really nice notes regarding their love of Word Balloon. But really, League, thank you very much. I've gotten new people joining. I've also gotten people that have upped their subscriptions via Patreon. Greatly appreciated, because I'm not cleared yet for work, and this is where the League is really helping me out. So thank you very much. If you want to subscribe to Word Balloon, it's free. But if you like what I do here and want to help out the cause, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the Patreon ad on the front page of wordballoon.com. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics, the industry's fastest-growing independent publisher, promoting new and established comics as Reading Dangerously. This year is the year of Reading Dangerously at Aftershock. They have a bunch of brand-new titles that are ready to debut in 2019, things like Stronghold with Phil Hester and Ryan Kelly, Oberon, a new supernatural series by Ryan Parrott. Our buddy Tim Seeley is back with a new series called Dark Red, and a lot more as well. Be sure to check things out here at wordballoon.com and on their website. In the weeks ahead, we'll be talking to more Aftershock creators about their books, including many of those names I just mentioned. You don't have to wait, though. You can go to their website. They've got press releases on a lot of these and links to articles about these new books, and also full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books and more you can order through your local shop at aftershockcomics.com. All right, let's get into it. Here's our conversation with Tom King, the King's Speech, a brand new edition, recorded before Christmas, but still very relevant with our conversation now on Word Balloon. I'm welcoming Tom King back to Word Balloon. It hasn't been that long, man. I'm glad that we do this a couple times a year, and we want to check in. And, man, tons of great books out right now, and unbelievable stuff. And big shoes are about to drop in Heroes in Crisis and in Batman, and certainly, the wrap-up of Mr. Miracle was fantastic. And you were kind enough because, as I told you, they don't have Walmarts. They only have one Walmart near me in the city, and it's a grocery store Walmart. And I've yet to be able to find that DC box of comics. So it's hard for me to find the Walmart DC books, but you were kind enough to kind of help me get up to date with Superman.
This Walmart thing, well, first of all, thank you for having me on, John. You are my favorite comic book podcast since every time, but you should support this comic book podcast just so I can keep listening to it. All of you listeners out there, I listen to every episode. I love this podcast, so it's a pleasure being on. I look forward to it. I want to talk old comics and new comics. I want to talk everything. Excellent,
man. Well, I'm ready for a nice marathon conversation if you are. Very cool. So honestly, man, I'm loving this Superman story. And is it Adam Kubert or Andy?
Andy.
It's Andy. Okay.
Andy. Adam is at Marvel. Andy is at DC. They're two warring brothers. It's like the Civil War. They're brothers on both sides, and they write each other.
Brother against brother. Oh my
God. Brother against brother.
Well, first of all, the latest issue with the Sergeant Rock story was just fantastic.
That's not out for another 2 months, but we can talk about it. We can. The best thing about the Superman stories. That's what I wanted to say to you. I was so proud of that Sergeant Rock story. I wrote to my editor because I had to send him to PDF, and I was like, I want everything, including the stupid Sergeant Rock, which hasn't been colored yet. Because I was like, I'm so proud of this story.
You should be, honestly. It sounds like a Sergeant Rock story, and obviously Andy, can make it look like, it's still his style, but certainly you can see his father's influence in there, and the great Joe Kubert. No, it's great, and I just love this idea of Superman traveling through the cosmos and now traveling through time as well.
Yeah, that story in particular, the Rock one, was super funny because we were at I went to 14 cons last year, so I'm going to get them all confused. But we were at some. I didn't mean to go to that many cons. Somehow, just my life tumbled out of control that way, which is fairly typical of me these days. But we were at some con. I was with I think it was in Toronto. And I was with Andy, who I'm very intimidated by the way, because he's been one of my favorite artists for 20 years or something, and now I'm working with him, and he's still insanely amazing. Yeah. And he knows. I mean, he's not only is he one of the great artists in the history of comics, his dad is one of the inventors of the medium.
Yes.
And he's not shy about that. He's one of these guys who's not like, I want to defeat my father. He's one of these guys who's like, I embrace my father. He was my best friend. He taught me everything. He loves telling stories about his dad and stuff. And on top of that, he teaches at the premier school for comics. He's one of the founders basically of that school and teaches there. So he knows everything about comic books. So he's just incredibly intimidating. And also he's the most laid back guy in the world. He's from Jersey, but he looks like a California dude, surf dude.
I agree with you. His body of work is amazing, and I knew that he obviously was teaching at the Kubert School as well. But this story is so great because I think some people fear writing Superman because he's so all-powerful in certain creators' hands. But this story through the cosmos, he's getting the shit kicked out of him, and that's fine. That's good. No, that's awesome, man. I mean, it should be. I mean, God, when, really, he's bouncing around the cosmos, and, we'll talk about the boxing issue, but, again, people, when you see this cube, I don't want to even spoil the Rock story, but it's fantastic, and there's all these just dramatic shots of a wounded Superman, to say the least, or in some cases, like in the boxing issue, he's getting the shit kicked out of him, frankly, and it's very, very cool. I love everything. So where are you? What has been released?
Well, if you've up to the Alien story,
where he's making the call back home to Lois.
No, the one before that, the one where the healer, the alien healer, the Star Trek-y one.
Yes.
That's the one that comes out next, I think, this weekend.
Okay.
But the wonderful thing about Walmart, the horribleness of the Walmart thing is the same thing that's the best part about the Walmart thing. The horribleness is nobody reads it. It is screaming into the void because these comics are so hard to find. Bless DC for trying to reach out into different markets, and I incredibly approve of them sort of trying to get comics on a newsstand where a dad can just pay $5, and there's a beautiful package. It's 100 pages of comics, 12, and for $5 you go there, you throw it at your kid and they read it. It's a wonderful package, but they're super hard to find. Even if you can get into a Walmart, they're hard to find in the Walmart. Even if you can find the shelf they're on, they're hard to find in the shelf. And then there might not even be there because someone already bought them. So like, that's the terrible part of it. And of course, comics are an international medium at this point. We have just as many readers overseas as we do in the U.S., basically. And because these comics aren't digital, people in Canada, and Canada obviously not that far overseas, but people in the UK, Australia, around the world can't read these comics at all. So it's a very small audience. But because of that, I can do whatever the fuck I want.
That comes through, man. No, it's this, and I know Brian's doing the same thing with his Batman story, where he's just Batman's just traveling along the DC universe trying to crack a mystery. But yeah, this thing, good Lord, I mean, he's with Adam Strange and Zeredith, and I don't want to spoil. Like I said, I mean, I wasn't sure after you said that the Sergeant Rock one was open, but I mean, there's great cameos of recognizable aliens that are very funny. Very, very Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide in one case. Yeah, man. No, I think it's a terrific story. And, of course, it's also very grounded, and there's stuff happening in Metropolis. It's great. Honestly, I love it. I imagine that eventually they're going to collect these things and put them out in the direct market. They almost have to, I would think.
I feel like we're not allowed to say whether or not they are. Okay. Because we want everyone to go to Walmart and buy them so that Walmart orders more of them.
Sure.
So if you're out there in the audience, go out there and buy them at Walmart so Walmart orders more of them. But if you logically think about it, I think there's a fairly good chance that they'll collect them at some point.
I understand. And this is a 12-issue story, right?
Yeah, it's a 12-issue story. I mean, there's a basic premise of the story, which is kind of just we hang things on, which is a girl got kidnapped and went into space, and he's chasing the girl. But that's just like, it's a way to hang 12 individual short stories that are all 12 pages long, drawn by Andy, written by me. So basically what I say is, like, every once a month, I take a break from continuity, I close my eyes and say, if I could tell any Superman story in the world and do it with one of the best artists in comics, what would I do? And then I just do it. And it's very pleasing. No,
the planet scenes are great, and I loved Lois and Clark kind of going over the classic Lois. How many P's in proliferation? 1. Things like and it was just this great alphabet list of words, and it's like, how about this? 2, 1, okay. And are they married in this? Because it's kind of, they could be or they couldn't be. They're definitely close. And are they married in this one, in the story?
I don't specify whether they're married or not. They're together, and she knows he's Clark Kent's Superman. So that's that much. But I don't specify whether they're married. I never talk about John, never talk about the son.
Right.
And in the first one, the father, Pa, is still alive. Which he hasn't been in continuity alive for 25 years.
Yeah. Well,
wasn't before that either. He was just alive during John Byrne era, which was my childhood. So I brought him back alive again.
Wow.
So, but you could read that scene as maybe happening in the Fortress of Solitude, and it's some crystal magic if you want to read it that way. So you can read it in continuity.
Well, and Jor-El makes a nice cameo, and it's that classic Silver Age design of Jor-El with the headband and everything, and the green and gold suit. Green, red, and gold.
Yeah, I mean, that is the most fun. Yeah, so we did an issue I was like, what if Superman met Star Trek? So I did a Star Trek issue. I was like, what if, there's like a classic moral dilemma and it has to get solved by the end. And I did an issue, the Sergeant Rock thing, like I said, I was at dinner with Andy, Pete Tomasi, and Dan DiDio, and they're these huge, all three of them and me, we're all Bronze Age fans. That's like,
sure. Absolutely.
Love. And we were just going over all the stuff we loved, and Andy was talking about his dad working in those days and all the art he loved. And I was like, well, what do you want to do for next Superman thing? Whatever you want. I don't care what it is. He's like, I want to do a Sergeant Rock as a tribute to my dad. But he's like, but we can't do that because we're in space. I was like, fuck that. He's like, well, the Sergeant Rock meets Superman. We'll find a way. Stories we'll make.
Hey, man, that was totally brave and bold. Bob Haney. Yeah, fuck continuity, man.
Yes.
I'm doing a story where Batman and Sergeant Rock are hanging out.
We Haney'd the crap out of it, is what we did. I'm going to turn Haney into a verb. It's when you solve a problem.
No, it made sense. It was fine, and you explain like how he wound up to meet Sergeant Rock and everything. It worked. Again, it's anything can happen, and it's that kind of universe. And the way he's bouncing around the cosmos right now, why not? It's I loved it. I just all the like I said, all the cameos that are happening in these stories are just fantastic. So, let's talk about the boxing issue. Because that was, well, you know me, man. I'm a huge boxing fan. And, again, one of the great Bronze Age comic books, Superman versus Muhammad Ali, which, in addition to Superman and Ali fighting, there is an alien boxing match as well. That was perfect. And truly, God, it was great action filled. I loved the pacing of the story, that it was, each page was round by round. Yeah, it was honestly, man. It's funny you were saying off the air that you're not that big of a boxing fan.
Well, there's in the midst of all this, the fun I'm having on the issue, I'm doing a storytelling weirdness to it, which every single page of all 12 issues of all 12 things is a new scene. So every page is a contained scene.
Wow.
So every time you turn the page, there's a time jump. I've played with that before in a lot of short stories I've done. And when you're dealing with only 12 pages to tell a complete story, it helps you to do that. So I'm trying to almost see if I can do it through a whole series and see how that works. So I was discussing this with my wife, and I was like, well, we'll have, by the time I get into the story, I'll do like, the 8 round. I said, no, you have 12 pages, do 12 rounds.
Totally.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's how we'll do it. That makes sense. So we just did 1 page for each round. And what I'm doing now, I just started, I went to Neil Adams at a con, and I got a print of the originals of the famous cover.
Yes.
The Superman Muhammad Ali cover. And of course the background is, there's probably like 100 identifiable people, maybe more, who are there.
All the cameos of people in the stands watching the fight. Yes.
And so what I'm currently collecting, if you see me at your con, you'll see me running around doing this, is I'm getting the signatures of anyone who's drawn in that background.
Oh, that's right, because there were DC creators that are in the scene as well.
Yes, and it's from '78, which is kind of when I was born. It's actually when I was born, but don't tell the people in Hollywood so they think I'm younger than I am. So it feels to me sort of like the start of things for me. So like half the creators have passed away, sadly, but half of them are still around, and it's really fun. So you bring it to Larry Hama, and he says, oh yeah, there I am with this long hair, and he tells you a story about working in Neil's studio back in the day and what a bunch of drunks they were, and then you bring it to John Workman, he talks bad about Larry Hama, and you just think, like all the people that are there looking super young and cool, like they identify themselves and they tell you stories. And it's like my new obsession is this, getting all these signatures as I can on this.
That's a great idea. Well, and also then the real celebrities. First of all, I know too that I know Neil did the final cover, but originally it was Joe Kubert, as I understand.
Yeah,
that was going to do the cover.
Kubert did it first. Apparently, Ali wanted I'm forgetting the other guy, but he didn't want either of them. They gave him like all the best DC artists, and he picked like not a crappy one, but like a generic one, and made a talk him out of it. I'm sure the comic fans and artists know who I'm talking about, so I won't mention my name. But then, Joe designed it, and then Neil drew it in, but he didn't. All the faces are from Neil.
Okay.
Neil still has the original art, but I'm told his family told me it's all folded and a little messy, but it still hangs on their wall somewhere.
Funny. Oh my God. Well, and then you get these great stories like, they approach celebrities to be on the cover, and some said no. So like John Wayne is on the cover, and you could tell it's John Wayne, but they had to throw a mustache on him to kind of, cover the fact that it's not John Wayne, basically.
And Brando asked for $3,000 to be donated to a Native American charity, and cheap ass DC said no.
Wow.
So
crazy.
So on the cover, Brando was already drawn in the cover because I think Neil thought he was going to say yes, and so they drew Kurt Vonnegut's face over over Brando.
Hilarious.
Kurt Vonnegut is so prominent on there.
Oh my God! And then also like the Welcome Back Kotter cast is there, and Lucille Ball is there. And then of course Batman and Luthor are obvious, even though their heads are turned away. But you could tell obviously that they're in the audience as well. Honestly, this whole motif of Superman. Go ahead.
But Luthor is Telly Savalas. If you look at him, because it's his but he's holding his hand up in this sort of weird way because he had a lollipop, but Telly Savalas wouldn't sign on, so he took the lollipop away and just said it was Luthor.
Oh, because I thought there's like a bald head next to Batman's where you can't see the face, and I assumed that was Luthor. But no, okay, and there's a celebrity that said no. That's cool. Even prior to Superman versus Muhammad Ali, if you go back to the Silver Age, it's more of a bare knuckle fight. But there's that great Kurt Swan cover of that world where Luthor is considered a hero.
Yeah, I know.
Is it Lexor? I can't even remember. I think it's Lexor. And it's under a red sun, and he and Superman just have this like fist fight. And again, Superman gets the shit kicked out of him. And it's great. It's this amazing, like I said, Kurt Swan cover, and he's got a black eye and just looks like hell, and Luthor is beating him down. It's very interesting. So I do kind of love whenever, and honestly, I think those are really probably the only 3 times that Superman is really like in a boxing sort of motif. But I mean, they're really great, and it truly. So was it your thought to pay homage to the Superman Ali thing?
It was, I mean, yes and no, because I was actually paying homage to an old Tom DeFalco Marvel 2-in-1 Annual 7. I think I remember talking. It's one of my favorite comics of all time, where the Thing has a boxing match. Have you read this comic?
No, I got to find this. Fantastic.
Oh, it is one of the great comics of all time. The one of the elders of the universe, whatever the fighter elder, the champion is called, the champion. Ugh, I'm so old, man. I have to talk my brain into these names that I used to have in my top. The champion comes to Earth, and he's like, "I'm going to destroy Earth unless one of your strong men can defeat me." And so then he takes all the strongest characters in the Marvel universe. All the people tuned in for Tom King to summarize old comics.
No, we said we were going to talk old comics. This is good.
So he takes all of the strongest characters from all over the Marvel universe. Sasquatch is there, Hulk is there, Colossus is there, and lines them up and says, whoever can, one of you has to defeat me or else I destroy the Earth. Not unlike the Muhammad Ali issue. And he goes through all of them one by one, and they all he immediately kicks the crap out of them. He's like Thanos level powerful. Like, he's like, Hulk, Hulk tears off his boxing gloves. He's like, you're just an animal, get out of here. And, he immediately just kicks everyone's ass. And then Ben Grimm is last to come. And he gets in the ring and he starts fighting. And Ben Grimm gets the crap kicked out of him. But unlike the others, he gets up off the floor. And then he hits him again, and he keeps fighting him, and then he's like, "Okay, I defeated you, I'm gonna blow up your planet." Ben Grimm gets off the floor again, and then he just looks at him, and he goes, "How can you still be fighting?" And he's like, "I'm too ugly to quit," which is the best line in the history of comics. It's drawn by Ron Wilson, and I have a Ron Wilson Thing sketch up on my wall, and so and then because it's a wonderful comic book, the champion said he lasts one round. And he goes, "Okay, you lasted one round with me. Your whole planet is saved." And he goes off, and then as he's leaving, Thing is he's like still in the corner. He's like, "Well, I would have gone round 2," and then he falls and collapses.
Man, I loved Marvel 2-in-1, truly. And isn't it weird? I remember when Slott had his Thing solo book, and it is so strange how tastes change, because certainly in the late 70s into the early 80s with 2-in-1, like the Thing was such a popular character. And it totally made sense that he had a solo series. And God, I remember one of my favorite, I think it was a John Byrne issue, where he faces an earlier version of himself, more of like Fantastic Four Year One version of the Thing.
Yeah.
He's more lumpy and not as, rock looking. It's more of like, kind of mud looking thing. And I love that, and he was, saying shit like bah and things like that. And at one point, the Thing is thinking to himself, and he's like, God, did I really used to talk like that? Jesus. So, no, I love the Thing, man. And it's and I was really happy when Bendis put him in the Avengers and wish there were more Thing scenes in there because, yeah, I think the Thing's awesome. And I always tell Brian, my favorite Thing encounters are when he fights Doctor Doom because literally it's the two guys from college that were absolutely on opposite sides of the campus and the college culture, and they both hate each other. And I love that Ben calls Doom Vic.
Yeah,
and it really, the subtext is, and I it's my show, so I'll swear. It's like, fuck you, Vic. You're still that
yes,
nerdy
yes.
that nerdy little jerk that was hated Reed. And I am not impressed with you. And by the same token, it's fuck you, Grimm. You're that big man on campus. You're a joke, and you never impressed me at school, and you certainly don't impress me now. And they have that kind of relationship that just cuts through all the intellect, and it really is just like two college kids that absolutely hated each other. And I love that. I think that's fantastic. So,
Ben Grimm is one of the best characters in the history of comics. When I almost went to Marvel before I got Batman. Right before I got Batman, or in the middle of, I don't know. At some point, I got very close to writing a Fantastic Four book, and it tore me to not be able to write that. That's such a good idea too.
Well, as we've seen with Bendis, never say never, and decades from now, you never know when you might wind up back at Marvel, and you've made your mark with the Vision, and it's it's okay. So great.
When AT&T buys Disney and it's all one big company, I'll get to.
As you know, almost happened in the '90s. When Marvel was on its knees and everyone was like, "Wow, is DC going to buy the Marvel IP?" And is Spider-Man suddenly going to be in the Justice League or something like that? Could that actually happen? So I remember Harlan Ellison on the Sci-Fi Channel. He used to do editorials or commentaries, and he was just like beside himself, depressed. And he's like, Marvel is, hanging by a thread, and it might go away, and don't be surprised if DC picks up the characters. And I'm just like, oh my God. So yeah, it was shocking stuff to hear back then. I was kind of out of comics. It was Kevin Smith's Daredevil and things like that kind of brought me back to comics back in 98, 99. Marvel Knights really kind of brought me back to comics. So crazy.
I was reading, when Sinatra, I was reading Frank Sinatra Has a Cold, the famous essay by Gay Talese.
Indeed, love it, Esquire. Great piece.
Yeah, one of the sort of the best essays in the history of essays.
Totally.
But for you, I'm sure you know this, but for the audience, one of the cool things about that is the whole thing is like he wanted to interview Sinatra, and Sinatra would not give him an interview. So he wrote this. He kept Sinatra saying, "I have a cold, so I can't interview." So he wrote this whole piece about Sinatra without ever actually interviewing him. And one of the things he writes about is witnessing Sinatra almost get in a fight with a guy in a bar. And what is this, early '60s or something? And the guy in the bar is Harlan Ellison.
Yeah.
And you're like,
right.
What? It blows your mind that you're like, I've been on stages with that guy, and he almost got in a fight with Sinatra. That's insane.
While we're on the Sinatra subject, briefly, great documentary that came out this year, Sinatra in Palm Springs.
I haven't seen it.
Unbelievable photographs, and everyone that's alive that knew Sinatra because he had a home over there, and
yeah, of course.
Obviously, was at all the bars and restaurants that he loved. All these people that were in Sinatra's life in Palm Springs. It's fascinating. It's fantastic. And he had 3 different homes. And in fact, you can, I don't know if it's Airbnb or if it's just privately rented, but you can, I know one of the homes you can rent and stay at Sinatra's home. I'm sure it's ridiculous to do it, but it was really cool. He also had a recording equipment, like 50s and 60s recording equipment in the house. So if he wanted to cut a demo or something like that, he could do it right there. So like a home studio back then, pretty amazing stuff. So yeah, it's amazing. Fantastic documentary. Sinatra in Palm Springs, everybody.
Where does it stream? Where is it?
I saw it on demand in a hotel. I was at Terrificon in Connecticut, Mohegan Sun.
You nerd! You're at Terrificon watching Sinatra doc. You are my best friend, John Santos. Just so you know, you just got elevated.
Well, and also, I'm working these stupid overnights in radio, So I'm up all different hours. And yeah, I mean, I was beat from the con, so I fell asleep probably like at 10. And then at like 1 a.m., bong, up, cannot fall asleep. So I'm like, all right, I'll rent a movie. And I almost re-rented Infinity War and almost re-rented Black Panther and all that stuff. And I'm just kind of dialing around. And like to rent those, it was like, almost $20. I'm like, I'm not going to spend $20. That's ridiculous. But then I saw for $10 Sinatra in Palm Springs. I'm like, oh, I'm all over that. And so yeah, I don't know where, if it's streaming, because it may still be in festivals. I'm not really sure. But man, even Barbara's in it before she passed away. Barbara Sinatra. Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty cool, man. Very, very cool. Can't recommend it enough. All right, back to your comics.
I was at.
Go. Yeah.
We're already tangentializing into old nothingness. So
this is what I love, man. What are you talking about? We can go on about Bing Crosby in a couple hours. You know that, but go ahead.
Dude, I will go on. It's the Christmas season. My house is nothing but Bing Crosby.
Beautiful.
So I was at I did a bunch of Hollywood stuff. We can talk about that too. I'll give you a vague notion of what it's like to live the Hollywood life. But I got to live the Hollywood life for a few weeks this year. And the last time I was out there, I was up. They put me up at the Beverly Hills Hotel, which is like I grew up in L.A. I lived my first 18 years of my life in Los Angeles, in West L.A. with my mother, a studio executive. Yes. And I saw more movie stars in 2 days than I'd seen in my entire life.
At the hotel at this stay.
At the Beverly Hills Hotel. If you see, it's got this kind of iconic front now. Now it's all owned by like the Saudi royal family. But it was. I mean, this was the place that like every screenplay in the 40s was written. Mobsters. It's also the place that Trump had his affair with Stormy Daniels.
Okay.
Like I said, so it's like it's full of crazy, slimy history.
Oh yeah. Oh, no, that's great. I think Robert Evans might have been discovered there at the pool.
Yeah, so I went out to the pool, and they've kept the pool so it looks just like it did in like 1959.
Wow.
And it was the most transcendent moment of I just went out there, and I was all by myself, and I'm standing by this pool, and you can just feel the cigarette smoke of like Sinatra yelling at some poor pool boy they didn't come fast enough. And I felt so much a part of that old sort of Hollywood scene. It was amazing.
That's fantastic, man. Jesus, that's wonderful. Oh my God.
It was. I was at the bar. I was sitting next to. I was between the movie star I'm doing the TV show with, and on the other side of me at the bar was Benedict Cumberbatch.
Wow.
So I was with Doctor Strange and between my movie star and Doctor Strange. I was like, what fucking life am I living right now?
That's fantastic. Did you get the nerve to talk to him or no?
He was taught. This was like a place that people met with agents. I was sitting next to Courtney Cox at breakfast. I ran into Mel Gibson in the bathroom. Now I know Mel Gibson is a horrible human being, as is Frank Sinatra. But it was still odd to see him in the bathroom.
I'm sure it was.
It was like one of those Looney Tunes cartoons. I thought Bugs Bunny would come out with Jimmy Stewart at some point and start making jokes. It was the craziest thing that ever happened to me.
That's wonderful, man. That's fantastic.
Yes. Tom King's Journeys into Hollywood will be in my memoirs.
That's beautiful, man. No, and you're right, man. I mean, 1982, I had this amazing summer vacation in Hollywood, and I met a bunch of celebrities. We got to go to the Bob Hope Desert Classic. So, yeah, the golf tournament, and so we met Jack Lemmon, and I'm trying to remember the other. Like Ernie Banks was there from the Chicago Cubs, and he was very happy to see Chicago people and stuff.
Of course.
But yeah, Jack Lemmon was probably the biggest celebrity at that. But then I went to Dan Tana's, and we had dinner there, and we met Rita Moreno. And this
that's cool.
Yeah, 1982 Rita Moreno, and she was very sweet. And in fact, she's like, "How old are you?" I'm like 17. She's like, "Let me give you a thrill." She grabbed my head and she kissed me.
Oh,
I know. It's insane. And I'm like, wow. Thank you.
Cumberbatch did the same thing to me. So we have something in common now.
Let me give you a thrill. That's beautiful, man. Sherlock.
He's just like, God! He's like, kiss me. It's like, it doesn't work, man. I still don't buy it.
Hilarious, man. You're killing me. Well, let's talk about Batman because big things are happening. The last issue reminded me very much of the Bond prelude to Diamonds Are Forever, where he's just slugging. Where is he? Where's Ernst Stavros Blofeld? and he's just punching and decking people left and right because he needs to find the man that killed Tracy Bond. And it's so great, and he's just so, on this mission. And we get this little walk through the rogues, a lot of rogues that maybe we haven't seen in a while, like Maxie Zeus and the like. But first of all, it was Michael Janin, right, who drew it?
Yes, it was Michael. Yes, that drew most of it. And I've been working with Mikhail. It's my editor finally met it. It's so hard. It's Mikhail Chanin. It's
Chanin. Okay, sure.
Like a little Hebrewish Chanin.
I'm with you. No, okay. Yeah, I always want to say it properly. So, Michael Janin.
I've been saying Michael Janin for a long time, and he's also the most polite person in the history of comics, so he would not mind if you pronounce his name wrong. But just I should at least try to pronounce it the correct way.
Well, I'm always happy when he shows up in your runs, and
then so he did 2/3 of the art, and Jorge Fornes, I'll probably pronounce his name wrong, even though I've met Jorge, did all the Batman scenes. So Mikhail did the Gordon scenes and the Alfred scenes, and Jorge, who this is his DC Comics debut, and he is going to be the next big thing.
He's tell. Well, say his name again. Say his name again.
Jorge Fornes. He's a Spanish artist, just like
Mikhail. Well, it was the Jorge Fornes scenes that really knocked me out because he was channeling Mazzucchelli.
Oh yeah, he's like Mazzucchelli meets Alex Toth. This guy is like
yes.
I'm doing another issue with him. He's coming on for 66, I believe, and then I'm never going to let him go because
I understand.
He's going to be everyone's favorite Bat artist by the end of my run.
Oh my God! Seriously, man, truly taking nothing away from Mikhail and Mitch and everyone else that has done various arcs with you, Joel and everybody. But Jesus, man, like I said, I'm like, this reminds me so much of Batman Year One in the best possible way. And I think you're right to even include the Alex Toth influence as well as Mazzucchelli. It's, oh my God, I was just like, this is Batman. This is fantastic. So great debut, and it will not surprise me within the next 6 months that everybody's talking about this guy because it was fantastic.
And he's all the sound effects are on the board. Like he's doing those, so that's why if you look at his pages, the sound effects do all sorts of weird things to help tell the story. Yeah, that dude's a guy. I was incredibly happy that he agreed to come on the book, and then he agreed to do another issue. So yeah, we're doing a thing with we're gonna do a little noir issue with The Question and Batman coming up.
Oh, great! Fantastic. As Batman's trying to get closer and closer to find out what the hell's happening in Arkham.
Yes. So that starts. But basically. Sorry to back it up a little bit, but
no.
In issue 50, they didn't get married. Spoilers.
Of course, yes, indeed. That's the last time we spoke.
The last time we spoke, yes. People are still a little upset. I get once or twice a day. I get this Twitter, and I'm grateful for it every time. I'm not complaining, but I get this Twitter where someone tweets at me and they say, "Tom, everyone I know hates you, but I defend you." And thank you for letting me know. That's very nice of you, and also you've crushed my soul.
Exactly.
So
we had the Mr. Freeze arc before the Penguin arc, of course.
We had the Mr. Freeze. So basically, 50 through 60 was one kind of complete arc called Cold Days, which is the name of the first arc. And that's sort of the Batman responding to the wedding and slowly starting to fall apart.
Yes.
And that culminates in this, like you said, in this issue where he's just out of control and he's just beating up people. And like there's no detective left to him. He's just a guy who's just crushing his fists into people looking for information because his brain is not where it should be. Because basically he's emotionally broken. And that takes us to the end of 60, which has this big reveal at the end.
Yes, indeed.
Of sort of Batman, and then what starts next is the next arc, the next sort of 10 issues, something called Nightmares with a K, because if you use the word night in Batman, it has to be K'd.
Of course.
And that is this sort of slow. I have to be vague about it because it's not out yet, but that's the psychological sort of peeling away of Batman, and what it is, it's a series of one shots. It's 6 1-shots because there's 2 issues off for a Flash crossover that Josh is writing.
Right.
Josh, again, we'll get back to it, but I had to do for the Hollywood thing. I had to write this pilot, and I needed 2 weeks off. And Josh was nice enough to come in and give me 2 weeks off by writing 2 issues. Josh Williamson,
yes, indeed,
one of the great writers in comics, and also just one of the great people in comics.
Incredible Flash run, and each time I have somebody on and we mention Josh, I'm reminded that it's like, dude, what are you waiting for? Get him on the goddamn show, and I know he'll do it. In fact, one of the times I saw him was with you, I think in San Diego back in 2017, and he's like, when are we going to be on Word Balloon? And I'm like, Josh, I totally want you on Word Balloon. I wanted you on Word Balloon back when you were doing Captain Midnight at Dark Horse, for God's sake. So you know how it is. I mean, you suddenly you look up and it's been 3 years. Today I talked to Chris Iliopoulos. Haven't talked to him in a couple of years. And, every time I talk to Meltzer, it's like, yeah, I got to get Chris back and everything. So, again, please, it's a great problem to have. Don't get me wrong. But I'm pleased that people want to be on Word Balloon. And certainly, eventually, Josh and I will have a wonderful Flash conversation and talk about things like the button, that wonderful Doomsday Clock tie-in. That you told me he did most of the heavy lifting on that story.
He did, yeah.
So.
But there are very few people who know more about comics and are as passionate about comics as Josh Williamson. So he'd be a good person to talk to.
Excellent, man. No, I'm looking forward to it. Well, I'm excited because we're putting this out after 61 comes out. See, I mean, as we're recording, it's coming out tomorrow. And I told you before we started recording, hey, spoil away, because I loved the way 60 ended. First of all, I loved Alfred and Penguin's scenes in 60 in particular. Hilarious. I mean, with the sardines and him kind of tempting him with the sardines and everything. Penguin in the cage and everything.
Oh, man, there's no character that's more fun to write in comics than Alfred. He is just the best. He's just this catty asshole who hides behind this posh atmosphere, but he's just constantly insulting you as he talks.
Yep.
Like every sentence Alfred said is like a cutting remark to your soul. He would be the one to be like, "Oh, Batman, all my friends hate you, but you're my best friend."
Aren't we getting an Alfred prequel soon?
An Alfred what?
Aren't they doing like early years of Alfred story?
Oh yeah,
something in the works.
Yeah, big TV shows can be Alfred story. I think there's gonna be a lot of Alfred sentiments here.
Is it a DC Universe thing?
I don't know what it is. Don't ask me. Why you ask me the hard questions, John?
I understand. What are you, Alan Arkin? Why are you asking me this? Why would I know these things?
I gave you my list in advance. You're only supposed to ask me how great I am and why I'm so great. That's what we agreed to.
I understand.
Yes, and then Penguin. Well, the most thing I wanted to get to the fact that Penguin had been having this romance, at least in his head, with a penguin, with an actual penguin.
Yikes!
That was the big reveal in the Alfred Penguin scene.
And then that final page, and I will say, because again, it's been out for 2 weeks now.
Yes, you can.
Batman comes back to the Batcave. Alfred is bloodied, and apparently the Penguin has been sprung free, and he's here. Who's here? Your father. And of course, it's Flashpoint Batman, Thomas Wayne as Batman, and that ever since that great reveal in issue 50, where you see. That's the Zapruder film moment of your run so far, where it's like, okay, all of these characters, it's all been one story and all one big plan by Bane all along, and to see Thomas Wayne as part of that plan. And I know, they had the conversation prior to that of, don't be Batman, do your, if you want to help me, if you want to do right by me, don't be Batman, have a family, stop being Batman,
right.
Have a life. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. That is in issue 61. So tell me what you want to about and that's the first issue of Nightmares, correct? Right.
So that conversation doesn't happen for a little while.
Oh.
Why it doesn't happen is the mystery of Nightmares. What happens next is you're put into a completely different. Batman finds himself in a completely different situation, and he doesn't know why, and he doesn't know how he got there and what happened. And it's part of his being sort of torn apart. It's hard to talk about it sort of tangentially, but again, it's a series of one-shots by the artists on it are going to be Travis Moore starts it off. We did an issue 38 together. And then it's Mitch Gerrits who did Mr. Miracle with me, who's the best, my favorite artist in comics. And Mikkel does an issue, and then we had the Flash break, and then Jorge, we just talked about, does an issue. Amanda Connor is going to do an issue.
Great.
So it's an amazing lineup.
Well, I'm excited, man. No, it's been continues to be an intriguing run, and
Yannick Paquette does the final. Oh, sorry, his name.
Who does the final?
Yannick.
Yannick Paquette.
Yannick Paquette. Yeah.
I'm with you. Okay. Again, let's get our proper pronunciations. Ivan Hayes, I've learned, instead of Ivan Rice.
Oh, my God, I know nothing. Well, I'm Tom King, and everyone gets it wrong. I'm like, that's Tom, dang it.
It's like that Python bit. It's spelled Raymond Luxury Yacht, but it's pronounced Throat Wobbler Mangrove.
Well, I work with Clay. I always say Clay Mann, but you pronounce. He's got two N's in his name, and you pronounce the second N, so it's Clay Mann.
Oh, really? It's like Mannon? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Mannon. I know it's hard to say. Mannon.
That's like in Something About Mary when Ben Stiller's like, you're not going back with that Brett.
Yeah,
Favre.
Brett Favre. If you see Clay at the con, just make he's can be touchy. So you should just call him Clay Mannon, and it doesn't get mad. And he has a brother, so he could be Seth Mannon and Clay Mannon.
That's fantastic, man. I had no idea. That's wonderful.
Yeah, he's a weird guy.
It's a good kind of weird though, so that's okay. That's cool.
Clay is my brother. The best part about, there's many best parts about comics. So one of the best parts about comics is making friends making friends for life with the creators, and the friendships I made with Clay and Mitch and my other collaborators are just, I feel it's gonna last a lifetime. And it's the best thing that happened in comics. Well,
and honestly, I think this run is really. This and of course Mr. Miracle as well. I mean, it's really kind of showing the strengths of these artists, and I like Janine and Mitch, and people that frankly, I didn't necessarily, they weren't on my radar, and now they absolutely are because of these incredible stories. And Clay is certainly another one like that as well.
Oh, sorry, we have to say Eisner Award-winning Mitch Gerrits now. That's his requirement.
I can appreciate that absolutely.
It's in his contract since he's the best artist in comics, apparently.
So, Mr. Miracle, a wonderful wrap up to Mr. Miracle. That was a great ride, and again, I almost have to feel. I always feel like I got to reread that because so much was happening in his head, and the war on Apocalypse, and being in hell, and God, I truly, man, like, I always feel like Highfather never gets enough screen time in a lot of New God stories. And maybe because he's like so good and so perfect, but I love that conversation, and certainly the dark side stuff. I loved Scott's kid just playing with Grandpa and grabbing his face and everything, and that was all terrific, man. And really everybody. And now is Oberon dead still, or was that in Scott's head, or
So Mr. Miracle. The last issue of Mr. Miracle does not present a clear answer to what happened in the entire series.
I assumed as much. Go on.
So it's difficult for me to talk about it because, to me, I 100% see exactly what I was intending to see, intending to do, and the message I was intending to say. Like, I see it, but I think that my opinion on what it is doesn't matter as much as sort of what people take away from it. And I feel like if I was to offer, I'd be like, okay, this is what, because people ask me all the time, they're like, what does it mean? Who is this? And
sure.
And what is that? I was like, well, I can't just, I
understand.
Can't say it, even though I like have even if you make something, I really love Mr. Miracle, and it's like, I don't think I can write sort of better than that. I think that's as good as I can write. And when you're writing as well as you can write, you kind of like, it goes beyond even you a little bit, where you've sort of torn down the walls between you and the audience so much that almost you don't understand what you're writing. I don't know how to describe it, but like that's when you get really good stuff. When you're sort of talking from a place in yourself that you can't, because I've said this before, but the whole point of art is to communicate something that's incommunicable. I'm not a professional writer. I write comic books for them.
No, it reminds me a lot of the kind of debates that would go on about Stanley Kubrick in 2001, and that's why. And I love 2010 was the sequel, I believe. Rohrscheider.
2010 Rohrscheider. Yeah.
And I love that movie, but it really was like this real like debate about the themes and ideas that Kubrick put in 2001, and then 2010 comes on. It's like, okay, this means this means that, and this means that. Any questions? No. Okay, thank you. Goodbye. And again, it was like, what okay. And it's a shame because no, I think leave it ambiguous by all means, man. I hope you never reveal what was in your head as far as what you think the story says. And again, this is as the run was going on. If people listen to our last conversations, I basically said the same thing. Like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know if it's a fever dream. I don't know if it's it's all in Scott's mind. Did he die? I mean, it was fantastic, and I love a good. If there's that kind of ambiguity and you're still able to tell an entertaining story, way to go. I mean, I haven't seen it yet. Orson Welles' last film, The Other Side of the Wind.
I saw the documentary, but not the film.
Me too. And, I'm holding out until and especially when friends are married and they've got kids and nobody has time. I really want to sit down with a couple of my film buff friends and really want to watch it and then decide. And as I've heard it described in people who have seen it, they've said it's like a fever dream. And it's very 70s in a lot of its the way they tell the story, and there's a movie within a movie. I love the documentary. The documentary was fascinating, incredible. Yeah. It's all on Netflix, kids, if you don't know. And the documentary is called "They'll Love Me When I'm Dead," but then the actual movie, Other Side of the Wind. I'm sure I've already talked about it on previous episodes, but it's he made it in the 70s. It was financed partially by the brother-in-law of the Shah of Iran, so it was tied up in Iranian money for years. And the rights, and they never were able to get the rights away. And it got to the point where in the 80s, Wells told Peter Bogdanovich, if I die and this is, not, I don't get the rights back in time to take care of it myself, I really need you to finish this. And sure enough, they finally did untangle all the legal problems. And Bogdanovich sat down with the cut that they had and has put it out. And I can't wait to see it. I mean, John Huston's in it, and Bogdanovich is in it. I love the fact that Rich Little was going to be in it for 5 seconds, and then they realized he wasn't a real actor. It's a fascinating story, but again, it's that idea of
Rich Little playing a Bogdanovich character in a movie Bogdanovich is in.
Yes,
yeah. There's like meta levels to meta levels,
and a bunch of other filmmakers too. Paul Mazursky's in there. Dennis Hopper is in there, and it is a comment about filmmaking then in the 70s, and also just I love the idea too that Wells, who really was ignored by Hollywood since the perceived failure of Touch of Evil, where Universal's like, this isn't what we wanted, and it really was like, as far as the studio was concerned, an embarrassment. We all know it's a classic. And so this was kind of what was going to be Wells' triumphant return, because he was so emboldened by all the 70s filmmakers. And like, oh, they get me. This young group of mavericks, they understand what I was trying to do. So certainly I can make my kind of movie now once again in Hollywood. And it's, I mean, really, honestly, the documentary, as you know, it's just amazing. I'll let you say anything you want about it now.
Oh, well, I mean, Wells is the most fascinating figure in the history of film, I feel.
Yes.
Like there's I just read a biography of his early life. Like, yeah, he's a Midwesterner from Wisconsin.
That's right.
She grew up outside Chicago-ish.
That's right.
And then so this is the end of his life, when basically he's a failure and he's trying to get his grip back on his art, but he can't quite. It doesn't make sense. He's almost given up on story. He's just going from pure instinct.
Yes.
But then but once he does the pure instinct, he has to put the story back in, and he doesn't know how to do that. So he just spends 10 years editing it. It's amazing. This weird. Wells is such a bizarre figure in the history of Hollywood. To have made your best film when you're 25 and to have revolutionized the industry, and then you think you're going to become he thought he was going to become president of the United States, right? And then,
well, I know he was involved in politics, and then of course, the Red Scare, I think, kind of, screwed him up, the McCarthy era and everything, and he, hightailed it to Europe for several years, and you're right. It's a fascinating life, and then again, never having a real studio behind him for any of these films. Literally would, was it Othello or Macbeth no, it was Othello that took over 2 years where they stopped shooting for 2 years.
Yeah.
so he could make more money and then pick up shooting again. Chimes in Midnight was made that same way, mid-60s Shakespeare thing that if you know your Thor, Falstaff is pretty much, the classic character that you see in Thor. It's the same. It's basically, it's the Shakespeare, Shakespeare's version of it, but it absolutely works. And as far as I'm concerned, it's it's the same guy. And no, it's incredible, really. What a great body of work. I love too that Bendis calls Steranko the Orson Welles of comics. I'm like, that's a very apt description of Steranko's body of work and his influence in comics.
That's fascinating. Steranko is the person. Well, I always think of it. In Cavalier and Clay, they very much make Will Eisner sort of the Orson Welles of comics, or the guy who sort of saw Orson Welles and put all those techniques into comics, and then they said, what's the next step? I remember that from Cavalier and Clay.
Sure.
But then I go back and look at Eisner stuff, I was like, there is no next step. He perfected it. He just kind of ride this wave.
It's probably out before this episode, but I'll tell you, I think I was telling you before we started recording, had an amazing conversation with Dennis Kitchen. And both about his career in underground comics and then, of course, his collaborations with Will. And, oh, my God. I got to meet Eisner. University of Chicago had this great humanities festival, and Gaiman interviewed Eisner at it. And
wow.
Scott McCloud was there, and Art Spiegelman was there. It was really, really great. And because it was in this, University of Chicago is kind of like if Chicago had an Ivy League school, it would be the University of Chicago. It's very much kind of a Harvard sort of, no disrespect to Harvard. But, it is that kind of very privileged kind of college and everything, and very highbrow. But it was great because after they spoke on this stage in a kind of lecture hall, they all went out to the lobby of the lecture hall, and everyone was just casual, and you could walk up and talk to anybody and stuff. So I talked to Gaiman, and I talked to Eisner. This was about 4 years before Word Balloon.
Wow.
And yeah, oh my God. And it was so great to meet Eisner and stuff. And I brought a handful of Warren and also Kitchen Sink spirits for him to autograph. And yeah, he was like, oh, these are great. And he couldn't have been sweeter, couldn't have been nicer and stuff. But I love Eisner. I mean, Eisner's amazing. So.
Yeah. Which is funny because I was just reading the Eisner How to Write Comics book.
Sure.
And I disagree with him on almost every single point he makes, which is probably why I'm a much shittier writer than him. But it's very funny. He's like, don't do this, and this is how time should pass between panels. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't.
Interesting.
He's like, don't put more than if a character has a conversation, don't put the conversation as multiple word balloons in a panel. Spread them out to multiple panels. Like, no, if you want to speed up the conversation, you put it in there, get a little pitter patter back and forth. So I felt myself arguing with Eisner, and then when you feel yourself arguing with Eisner, you just feel like you're losing this argument with Eisner.
It'd be interesting to hear what McCloud thinks of the things that Eisner says in the book. Because I think McCloud really, showed that you can do more than what Eisner's suggesting based on what you just said. So yeah, I don't know. Okay, let's take a break and get into our sponsor. This portion of Word Balloon brought to you by Aftershock Comics, the industry's fastest-growing independent publishing company, promoting both new and established comic audiences to read dangerously. They're claiming 2019 as the year of reading dangerously. As a publisher of many of the most talked-about independent titles of the past few years, things like Marguerite Bennett's Animosity, Garth Ennis' A Walk Through Hell, Dark Arc from Cullen Bunn and Juan Doe, and of course Donny Cates and Baby Teeth, Aftershock is pushing the envelope even further this year with new releases and ongoing series that continue to thrill, chill, and challenge both imaginations and sensibilities. Aftershock is working with top writers and artists and some of the brightest new stars in the creative community. Some of the new titles that are coming out this year, things like Stronghold with Phil Hester and Ryan Kelly, Oberon, a new supernatural series featuring Ryan Parrott, Dark Red, a vampire living in rural America from Tim Seeley, and things like Out of the Blue and Horde. They're going to cut across all genres to take readers far beyond the comfort zones. Now, in the weeks ahead, we'll be talking to more Aftershock creators about their books, but you don't have to wait. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, let's get back into our conversation now on Word Balloon. But I want to get back to your books now because...
Oh, yes, I read.
And no, all tangents are welcome. You know that. Heroes in Crisis is another great kind of mystery of where this story is going. And I love the ambiguity that you're playing with in that. And I mean, God, you start with Wally being dead, and now, we see Wally in Sanctuary in issue 3. And, what the things that he's dealing with. It's heartbreaking, man, because, I think all of these heroes and villains, you feel their pain in this story. And it's great. I have no problem with, I'm 3 issues in and have no idea where this is going. That's terrific.
The first thing I say about that book is, God damn, it is beautiful. That is a beautiful book.
Yeah.
Clay has upped his game in that book, and of course the third issue is drawn by Lee Weeks, who's already at the top of the game. The thing I'm most proud about that book is just how it looks. Like every issue, I'm just blown away by the art. So that's the first thing to say. But Heroes in Crisis continues along. I feel bad talking about it because anytime I talk about it, Wally fans get legitimately mad at me.
Sure.
Which
no, I get it.
They should be. And as a Wally fan, I think Wally is the much better Flash. This is something Josh and I disagree with. We have long arguments over this. He likes Barry. He's a fool. Wally is a much better Flash.
Well, luckily, I think there's room for both. And depending on where your story is going,
there's clearly not room for both. Barry is so boring. If you people like Barry, that
I grew up with Barry, dude, and again, Barry in the hands of Carrie Bates. I'll tell you, man. Jeff Johns and I would disagree with you. I know Jeff, obviously, because he brought him back. Way, early conversations with Jeff. We always talked about how much we love Barry and the importance of what Barry represented and everything. And
Barry represented generic white guy. That's what Barry represented.
Well, and you're right. And as far as the Silver Age stuff, I would agree with that. But no, honestly, man, I think in the 70s and certainly into the 80s, Carey is such a. I love every time he comes back to comics.
Me
Carey
too.
Bates.
Me too. He's a great writer. I love Carey Bates.
That Elseworld story that he did about what if Jor-El was able to save his whole family, and they all came to Earth.
I read a Captain Atom thing by him recently. That was
yes.
Yeah. He's still good. He's very good.
Yeah, he's amazing. So again, growing up with Barry, but again, loving Wally just as much, and I get the absolute adoration that people have for Wally because he's the first side. He and Dick are the first sidekicks to really graduate and get to be their own men, and I think that's really, and especially in the case of Wally, the way Crisis ended, and they could have left Barry dead, and it would have been I would have been okay with that. I'm glad he's back because I missed him. And again, I think just like Jay, the 3 generations of Flashes are and Bart's his own thing, and I love Bart. Bart's hilarious, but it really was this whole Jay was Barry's mentor, and Barry is obviously Wally's mentor and everything, and I do love that through line. And also, God, that moment in Infinite Crisis, speaking of Bart, when he's trying to fight evil Superboy Prime. And that great moment where you see Barry and he's just like, Bart, you were never alone. And it's like, oh, my God, there he is. See, I'm telling you, man, you gotta forgive us older readers sometimes with that stuff. But I like I said, I think there's room for both. And I am fascinated to see what your story is going to hold. And also, I mean, you have to be coordinating with Josh because I assume Josh has plans for Wally as well, given where, Wally was left last time we saw him in Flash.
Oh, yeah. Then it's all being coordinated. But I want to speak up for Wally since you just gave us made some points
the Barry
about
argument,
which were fine points, but you're wrong. what Wally is, what he represents, at least from my generation, I feel like he's essentially the Peter Parker of the DC universe.
Interesting. Okay.
He's the everyday guy. He's the guy who cuts the tension with a joke. He's the guy who's too young to be in the fight. Because I like if you watch JLU, that's Wally. That's not Barry.
Absolutely, 100%.
He's the guy. Famously the episode where Lex Luthor takes over his brain and picks up his mask and goes, "Ah, I know who you are. What? Who are you?" That's what Wally is. He's like the everyman character. He's us if we got superpowers.
That's
so
good.
he's very much even more than, because Dick Grayson's almost a little too. I wrote Dick Grayson for years, but there's something a little too idealistic about, too perfect about him. That Wally's just a little more flawed in sort of that Peter Parker way. Like Dick will always pay his rent. I think Wally's going to be late.
I get it. No, that's great, man. Absolutely.
That's why I feel like that character works.
I wonder if he's going to show up in Titans, or is the CW's deal meaning that, Wally's only going to be on the Flash TV show or whatever? Because I got to say, man, I'm a convert on Titans. I saw that trailer and was like, I don't know, fuck Batman. What the hell's going on? And, I haven't watched that final episode yet because we're recording before it's come out, the final episode of the season. But I really did a 180 on Titans, and I'm like, no, actually, I'm really digging this. And the episodes that not only featured the Titans, but then like the Doom Patrol episode and the Hawk and Dove episodes. Oh, my God. These are some of the greatest depictions of those. I really like the
Hawk and Dove one, too. I've just seen the first two, but I really like the Hawk and Dove depiction. Yeah, absolutely. I got to go to the premiere and see all the stars there.
Oh, that's great. Well, you'll be happy when you see the next appearance of Hawk and Dove later in the series. They go more into the origins of Hawk and Dove, and I was really amazed. I was blown away. And again, that Doom Patrol episode is just classic. I keep meaning to text Gabe Hardman because he's like the biggest comic creator fan of the Doom Patrol that I know of.
Doom Patrol, really?
Isn't that interesting? Oh yeah, he loves Bruno, Italian name that I can't remember right now. That was the original artist on Doom Patrol, and I agree. He had a great, very simple, deceptively simple style in the same way that Kurt Swan. I love hearing people say, "Oh, Kurt Swan, it's just so blah," and it's like, oh man,
what?
I know I'm like, can you miss subtlety more? And how amazing Kurt Swan. I love that. I'm sure we've talked about it before. That one page of Superman heads of him, like in various, like him laughing, him thinking, him angry. And it's like, yeah, that's Kurt Swan, man. No, nobody can emote with their art more than Kurt Swan. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, Kurt Swan did to Superman what Carl Barks did to Ducks. He took this generic character and kept him generic, but then put all this emotion and all this stuff, like almost like a Japanese art where you have the same thing repeated, but it just changes a little bit and it changes the entire meaning. It's beautiful stuff.
I'm with you, man. No, I love that stuff. And I also, the people that shit on the Weisinger era, I mean, Mort was a jerk, don't get me wrong, but it's like, oh, these stories were goofy, and it's like, all they were, like, Pat Boone showing up, or Alan Funt, the candid camera host, and, Jimmy Olsen as a caveman beetle. And I'm like, you don't understand. They were making pop culture references because that's what was going on around then. So, yeah, they were goofy, but they were fun, and they were never meant to be serious. And also, they were still fighting the after effects of the Comics Code and everything. So I appreciated the weird, inventive stuff from the Red Kryptonite stories. Superman has the head of an ant. Oh, my God. It's like, well, yeah, because, again, 50s bug movies were very big back then. So I was always cool with that stuff. And then even, God, the romance stories of when, I think her name was Sally Sewell, when Superman had amnesia, and he thought his name was Jim White, and I think it was, again, exposure to, like, Red Kryptonite or something, so he didn't have his powers, and he's living on a ranch, and so he was Jim White, and he falls in love with this beautiful rancher and everything, and it's this very sweet Clark Kent story and everything. So, and again, definitely drawn by Swan. Good stuff, man. Oof. Love it.
Yeah, no, there's I collect old Action Comics. It's kind of what I get when I go to a convention. I try to get an old Action Comics from the 40s every time, and I try not to get them slabbed, although I do sometimes because I'm an idiot. And
did you say from the 40s?
From the 40s, late 40s. I like late 40s Action Comics. I just think
so. Yeah, which artist was that? Like Win Mortimer and
it's Win Mortimer and Al Plastino.
Of course, Plastino's amazing.
Yeah, I met Plastino before he died. I met him very briefly, and he was very nice.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Jesus.
And
I agree. I agree with you. A lot of those Superman artists that they aren't the immediate like first names, that come to mind and stuff. I'm a huge Win Mortimer fan. I loved his cover work, and Plastino was great.
Yeah.
Of course, Kurt Schaffenberger, unbelievable stuff.
Yeah, Wayne Boring, these guys.
Now I was going to say, I have to confess, the guy I don't get.
You don't like Wayne Boring? Too cartoony for you?
There's something funky about his bodies. Everybody is at least a 3X or even a 4X. Like, these guys are heavy guys with big torsos and everything. It's like, whoa.
Big torsos and short arms. Everyone just it looks like someone took a hammer and just knocked on everyone's head once.
and his faces are kind of, they're just weird. I don't know. There's a little goofy Julius Culp, Jerry Lewis kind of thing every now and then shows up in a Clark Kent face that Wayne Boring did, or I really can't describe it better. It's funny. I started buying the IDW comic strip collections, and at first I'm like, oh, this is great. It's all this Swan stuff, and then very early on the run they switched. So Swan went to do the monthlies, and Boring went to do the strips. And there's some amazing stories in the strips, and they are almost like alternate cuts of great comic book stories as well. They did the same stories, but slightly differently in the daily comic strips. And there's like a great Bizarro story I know that Boring drew that's just amazing. But yeah, I got to be honest. Like, I'm like, I don't know, man. I really don't know. So.
What I like about Wayne, I agree with you, Wayne Boring, but what I like is he pulled the camera back in cool ways. He would, like, I don't know what he liked to do, but everybody was tired of drawing the same figure. But you get Wayne Boring, but like the camera would pull back and you show this, like, you get this, like, that's what you need from Superman. You need a sense of scale sometimes. You need to see him pushing an entire mountain over. That's why I like Wayne Boring sometimes, is that he would do that. But yeah, I agree with you. Of those guys, he's my least favorite. Although he's prized because he's got that kind of, it's a very golden age look. It's kind of like halfway between Schuster and Swan. It's like almost like.
I agree with that. Absolutely. I think that's a very good, description of Boring and everything. And truly, that's a conversation I have to have, a future conversation with Wade, because Wade's such a Superman expert. Yeah, I'd love to hear what he thinks. And I even remember, I think the Comics Journal had some panel with a bunch of like indie people, and they were talking various like little debatable kind of issues. And they said, okay, the quintessential Superman artist, Kurt Swan or Wayne Boring. And it was a good argument back and forth. It was fantastic. I loved it.
Oh, so. Well, that should have been an argument. Should have been Al Pacino.
Jim Mooney doing Supergirl and Lois Lane and stuff like that. Oh, my God. I mean, he was terrific, too. So
those old comics. This is the best. Let's just talk old comics the whole time.
Seriously, man. I know. Am I missing what? Have we hit all the current Tom King creations right now?
Yes. Well, I'm doing Double Ship Batman. It's going to be in Nightmares coming up. You should buy that. Heroes in Crisis. Horribly sad, but it gets really good. It is really good. And
it's incredibly good.
And Superman. I feel like there's one other thing that I write. Oh, Mr. Miracle, which we already talked about. But
yes, we did. And then, but that just wrapped up.
Mitch and I are prepping the Mr. Miracle follow-on right now, which is going to be like the most ambitious thing I've ever done. So
is it another New Gods Fourth World story, or is it just you guys doing something else?
It's not New Gods. No, we're done with the New Gods. We're wiping the Mr. Miracle New God story is done. We're doing another. A classic DC character, or two classic DC characters, or three classic DC characters, or a team, or something, and and we're giving them the same the Vision Mr. Miracle treatment to a different character. But I'm sort of I've in the first part of my career, which is sort of Vision, Omega Men,
yes,
and Sheriff. That was sort of all about the Iraq War and my experience there. The second part of my career, which is sort of Batman, Mr. Miracle, and Heroes in Crisis, was about sort of PTSD. And so now I'm going to start a new sort of theme, or a new sort of way to go. So that the first start of that will be in the series Mitch and I do next.
Wow,
which
that's fantastic.
So it's a lot of prep. It's the most prep I've ever done for things. I'm going sort of back to basics. I'm kind of tearing myself down and rebuilding myself as a writer, hopefully. So we're going to use a completely different way to draw the comic and a completely different way to tell the story. And I'm trying to combine all these different sort of elements I'm trying to combine I'm doing a lot of this film noir research, which is weird to say.
Exciting.
So all I'm doing is watching
for composition of what you want to do, or is it more thematically, or
for how I want to tell the story, basically. For how I want to use some of these sort of film noir tricks and the way they use voiceover and the way they match it with flashbacks and the way the role, the relationship between men and women, that kind of sort of things. I want to steal a lot of that sort of from old film noirs and sort of modernize it in this comic. I mean, not everyone's doing that, but I want to. Sometimes when you're a writer, you kind of get on these tangents. You're like, there's something there I want to steal, but I can't quite get at it. So I know there's something in film noir that I want to steal. And so what I'm doing is I'm just watching all these old film noirs over and over again, and then I'm trying to expand my readership. I just did a big dive into Los Bros Hernandez, that stuff, and I'm reading a lot of old Pogo comics and a lot of. I'm trying to read the best of the stuff I haven't read yet, the classics that I haven't read yet. I just read 2 volumes of Sager's Popeye and.
Oh, I love that stuff. Oh my God, and I'm so bummed. Did you see the new Popeye cartoon? No, I haven't seen it. Is it good or bad? No, it's really bad. They took his pipe away because, of course, smoking is bad.
Yeah. No.
So now he has a whistle instead of the which I get because the pipe did trill like a whistle, but it's don't take away his pipe. I mean, and that's just the beginning of Bluto is clean shaven now. It's just weird and wrong. And man, I'm telling you, I love. All that old original E.C. Seeger stuff. Oh my God, it's fantastic. And I know too. I just read that there's a whole collection of Thimble Theater, which was the original comic strip, that Popeye just showed up into 2 years into the run or whatever, and they collected all the Thimble Theater stuff pre Popeye in a volume. And I'd love to read that. I mean, and I really loved IDW did a great job. On their recent Popeye comics and stuff.
Great. That's what I've been reading. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm a huge Popeye fan. I love, especially the black and white Fleischers. They're fantastic. They're so funny.
Oh, they're so good.
Yeah, and just the lines. Olive, some days you give me apoplexy.
I'm already laughing.
And just hey, what are you doing over there? Just Bluto just. Muttering, hey, come over here. And then he hits him. Wow.
Yeah, I never thought about it. You can't have Popeye. Yeah, you can't have modern day Popeye because he can't smoke a pipe anymore as a father of 3 children. I have a picture in my room that Gabriel when my son's name is Crosby, because we talk about many times. I'm a big Bing Crosby fan. And when he was born, Gabriel Hartman did a Bing Crosby portrait for me. Which is beautiful and hangs up in my son's room, but he's smoking a pipe, and my wife always yells at me. He's like, if he turns out to be a pipe smoker, I'm like, why? So one pipe in his room.
I always love, they show it all the time now. It's certainly at Christmas time, the Bing Crosby, David Bowie duet.
Yes.
But I just love that idea of, hey, how you doing? Why don't you come over here and sit for a while? And I just love how he starts off so high, and then it's like going down a staircase. Because it really is he always, well, I'll tell you, it's a fine day out here in Los Angeles, and let me tell you a few things that me and the kids did. It's all right, man. Go, Bing, go. I want Gary Gliddens to finish his biography.
The new volume's out, yo.
Is it out?
It's out.
Oh, fantastic. Tom, I'm going to buy this as soon as we're done talking. That's
good.
Wonderful.
It's called The Warriors. I've read it. It's great.
Oh, man, I am so excited because
I'm ahead.
Truly, man, especially, again, younger generations, if all they know is that old man that's singing with David Bowie on the Christmas song or even just White Christmas, it's you don't know this guy. He was so interesting. He was a pothead, for Christ's sake. Hey, nothing wrong with a little tootski over there. Let me have a little hit from the bong. But I love him, and just the innovations that he brought to, and I know I'm talking to someone who knows the innovations he brought to recording and everything, and he brought the reel-to-reel tapes over from Germany, the Ampex machines, and brought them to America, and also just because I love the fact
to be lazy, that's what it was.
Well, I know, and that's what I was going to say, man, because he wanted to do his radio show in 3 months for the year. and then just play golf and have fun and hang out and not really have to work. And that's really when they started, as opposed to having live musical shows, that they would start recording them, and he would edit them down. He'd do like 40 minutes, and they'd cut it down to the best bits of 30 minutes and everything. No, it's fascinating. And just some of the cool things he did, like, because sometimes I'll conflate it with Hope, Rosemary Clooney. And I mean, it hasn't even been covered in the books yet, but I know post White Christmas, they had a radio show on CBS Radio for like a half hour of them just singing songs. And he just kind of, he's like, "Hey, you're great. I love singing with you. Let's do this." Or his stuff with the Andrews Sisters, and also I love, it's on the American Masters, and I'm sure we've talked about it before, Bing documentary, where you hear some of the recording sessions with him and the guy who ran Decca Records, and they absolutely disagree with like whatever take they're doing. And it's just back and forth of just nastiness. And it's like, I'll do it the way I want to do it. Don't tell me how to sing. Well, Bing, I think I know what I'm talking about. I make records. You don't know shit about how I sing. And it's like, wow. Love it.
Yeah, these guys, they were just they were all assholes. And
yeah. Well, that's, there is the whole like spanking his kids and God, his 4 sons from the marriage with Dixie Lee, it's heartbreaking. They all got messed up, and they all died before 40. 2 of them killed themselves. I mean, that did not go well. Yeah, Jesus Christ. But again, you can't help it. It's fascinating. I mean, again, not the greatest people necessarily.
Not the greatest people, but I was watching Mad Men, and they said that Bing Crosby makes every song sound like Christmas. It was like kind of an insult, but I was like, that's what it is to me. When I hear Bing Crosby, I get that Christmas feeling. And sometimes when you're having a hard day and everyone's yelling at you, you just need a little Christmas feeling in your soul. So you try to ignore the fact that all his children, or half his children, killed themselves, and you lean into it.
I understand. No, also like such a huge crossover hit. He would sing country songs. He would sing Hawaiian, theme songs. And again, everything that they attribute to, Beatles, the Beatles, first people go, well, Elvis was first. It's like, yeah, but Sinatra was before Elvis, and before all of them, there was Bing. Bing really was the first great king of pop in the 30s.
Well, there was Al Jolson first, I guess. Like, Bing was an Al Jolson clone, and then Sinatra was a Bing clone, and then Elvis, then the Beatles, and then everyone, right?
And I love, too, that the press wanted to, say, oh, Hope and Sinatra hate each other. It's like, no, we like each other a lot. I love in the Rat Pack movie, Robin and the Seven Hoods, when Bing shows up, and Bing is absolutely swinging right there with the guys that are 20 years younger, or that wonderful duet in High Society. Oh, yes. Swell party it is. Good Lord, I love that song. And truly, they are at their peak, both guys. And it's literally like watching an amazing tennis match. These 2 incredible singers just topping each other with each line and just, blending together. And I love the stuff with Louis Armstrong in High Society is amazing. The song about the history of jazz.
Yes.
You got Louis Armstrong just scatting along, and Bing just taking this great bass line singing, and it's incredible. And also how he stuck up for people like Louis in the 30s. When there were places in the South that they'd make shorts together, and it's like, yeah, we don't want to run those, and it's like, hey, I'm not making these if Louis not with me, and just the respect that he had for all these other musicians. Were there stories to the contrary in Gary's books? I haven't seen them yet, or I don't remember them.
No. For his time, he was fairly progressive in terms of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Especially with paying respect to the guys who got him. Because Bing would be nothing without Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong sort of founded that type of singing, which is why that song is so ironic in High Society, because here he's singing about jazz, and here's the founder of jazz is standing next to him, and he just gets a little bit of a solo.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. Well, and again, he's got Louis' band backing him up at least, and then.
That's true.
But honestly, Bing continues to fascinate me. And also, in a very rock and roll sense, quite the Hellraiser. was like arrested all the time for drunk driving and smashing his car. And sorry about that, Your Honor. I didn't know it was that big of a deal. Is that a problem? Yes, it is, Bing.
Are we going to talk comics and Bing Crosby for 2 hours? Because I am in. This is the best conversation ever.
We always have to talk a little Bing. Come on.
We have to. I can get it.
For God's sake, it's like, Loeb and I were in a meth out jag for years. We couldn't help it, for crying out loud. Oh, good stuff, man. No, so Bing.
This is my brain. Bing had an affair with Grace Kelly, which makes no sense in my head.
During High Society, I would have.
During High Society. Well, Grace Kelly had, God bless her, but she had an affair with most of her co-stars.
I was going to say, yeah, she was, forgive me if this sounds inappropriate, but yeah, she was quite the minx. She got her.
Yeah, but in an empowering sort of way. She
Sure.
But I just watched Rear Window with my son. My son got surgery on both his feet because his feet weren't growing the right way.
Aww.
So, but I was very stressed, but he came through. He's such a trooper. So he's 10 years old, and he turns 10 tomorrow. And such a trooper, but he was stuck at home. He couldn't move with his feet in casts. And I was like, we're watching Rear Window.
Genius. That's fantastic. It's a great movie.
Right? And so I watched it with him. And so then for the rest of the day, we're looking at the window trying to find murders. And I was like,
have you ever seen it on the big screen?
No, I never have.
In the 80s, there were like several Hitchcock movies that were pulled off of television for a few years from the 60s through the 70s. And it was kind of in his will that so many years after his death, he would re-release them in the theaters, and then they went to home video, and they were back on cable and stuff. And it was Trouble with Harry, and Rear Window, and Vertigo, and I can't remember what the fourth one was right now. But anyway, saw Rear Window, and it was downtown Chicago. I was downstate at Illinois State University, about 2.5 hours from Chicago. Took the road trip with a buddy to just see Rear Window on the big screen. And that amazing slow-motion kiss when Grace Kelly reaches in. And I'm telling you, on the big screen, it is very impressive. And it really is this just this amazing slow-motion shot. And you really do appreciate that. I wanted to ask you, as you say you're kind of borrowing ideas from noir, what can you tell me some of the noirs that you've been watching and, what you've been enjoying?
What did I watch? I'm watching some of the classics. Out of the Past is like one of the best movies of all time.
Absolutely. Love that movie.
If you watch one noir in your life, that's the one you should watch, I think.
100%.
I would say. The first 45 minutes of that are perfect. Like if the second half is very, very good, it's like an A+ movie, but the first half is a perfect movie, and if the second half was as good as the first half, it would be like better than Citizen Kane. It would just be remembered. It's written so perfectly, and the dialogue is so sharp, and it has the best line in cinema history when sort of the femme fatale finally confesses what she's done, and the sort of that she's in a lot of trouble, and Robert Mitchum just looks at her and goes, "Baby, I don't care."
Do you know his Christmas? Go ahead. What's that?
Do I know what about Robert Mitchum? I know a little bit, but not all.
My favorite Christmas movie.
Also, a guy who liked to smoke a little weed.
Absolutely. No, Mitchum is amazing, and I got to say, as I've gotten older, I've gotten to appreciate him more. And he really just did not give a shit, and in a lot of ways, and that's fantastic. And I love the fact his career started making Hopalong Cassidy movies, and he loved it. Because he's like, hey, you're outside all day, you get a good box lunch, I'm hanging out with my friends, it's fantastic. But I love my favorite of recent years. I had never seen it until about 5 years ago, and now it's hands down one of my absolute favorite Christmas movies. It's called Holiday Affair, and it's Mitchum and Janet Leigh, and Wendell Corey. Wendell Corey from Rear Window is the cop, and you know him from a million other supporting roles in films and television. And the whole thing is Janet Leigh is a widow, and she has a young son. And Wendell Corey is really pressing hard about, hey, let's get married. It'll be good for the kid. The kid's just not connecting with Wendell Corey. And all of a sudden, Robert Mitchum is this near-to-well salesman who is at a department store, loses his job, and just kind of gets sucked into first through the kid and the toys that he's selling at this department store. But then he meets Janet Leigh. And I always say it's like Robert Mitchum took a wrong turn in Out of the Past and suddenly found himself in a Christmas movie. And it's just like, all right, I'm here. I'll just do it. And really the subtext is, hey, Janet, I know Wendell's a good guy, but I think you ought to marry me. And just in that very nonchalant kind of way. It's great. And I just love it. It's really interesting. And I mean, Janet Leigh's trying to be a strong woman, a widow that lost her husband during the war and everything. Late 40s movie. I absolutely, if you've never seen it, I absolutely recommend it as a fantastic Mitchum movie. So, another weird Mitchum movie? Do you know, I want to say it's called The Trouble with Harry, and Jack Webb directed it and co-stars in it. And it's not a perfect movie at all, but it's a fascinating movie because it's trying to be a wiseacre army movie. And it's so strange because you're so used to straight-laced Jack Webb being Joe Friday. But that said, he was a real fan of comedy. And even before he was doing Dragnet on radio for a very brief time, he had this crazy sketch show of comedy called The Jack Webb Show. And it was pretty funny, actually. But this movie is not funny. Or maybe not Trouble with Harry, Trouble with Archie, I think. Definitely Archie's in the title.
Well, I just saw Sunset Boulevard recently, and he's the comedy best friend in Sunset Boulevard. Yes,
Jack Webb, absolutely he is. No, I love Sunset Boulevard.
My father worked for Jack Webb back in the day.
Wow, doing what?
He was. I mean, it's gotten more. My father is the teller of the best of fish stories, so you never know. But he had some job for him right out of college back in 1968, where Jack Webb was selling stories to the movie studios, and my dad was helping him develop these stories or something. So my dad will tell you Jack Webb stories all day long.
Holy cow! Because another fascinating Hollywood guy that's only known for Joe Friday, but no, he had a lot of power at Universal. He created Emergency along with Chad Dragnet and Adam 12, and Stephen Cannell, the old great A-Team creator and Wise Guy, and so many other amazing shows. Co-creator of 21 Jump Street. He talked about first coming to write for Webb on Adam 12 and had great stories about working for Jack Webb and stuff. And I truly, Pat Novak is the closest thing to a great noir radio show, I think. Pat Novak for Hire. And that's a detective character that Webb played and is constantly getting the shit kicked out of him by the antagonist that he has to face and stuff, and has nothing but a contemptuous relationship with the police. It's very, very funny. Well, I'll tell you one of my favorite noirs, and I've talked about it with our mutual friend Mike Cronenberg, the Setup, Robert Ryan.
I love it. Did you know I did a comic book that was dedicated to that movie?
I did not. Tell me.
I did it. People don't know, so sorry, you were probably going to go. But the Setup is it's a boxing story with Robert Ryan, and there's like a well, anyways. I did a command. It's just one of the issues I like most that I've ever done is this Commandy issue for this Commandy challenge.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I did it with Kevin Eastman, who did the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Holy cow! I'm gonna have to go back and grab that issue. I've got them all. I just haven't sat down with all of them
yet. And Freddie Williams is on the inks.
Oh, fantastic!
It's one of the most gorgeous comics I've ever worked on. But so I recently watched that movie, and in the movie there's the first half of the movie is he's just backstage waiting for the fight, and all these different fighters are kind of getting pulled into their fight, and either they win or they lose, and they come back and sort of report on him. And it's like this almost existential crisis because he's like just sitting there as one person goes off and comes back beaten, and one person goes. And I was like, I love this concept of like you're just sitting in a room. That's what fucking life is, you know. You're just sitting.
Yeah.
You're sitting in a room and you're waiting and you're watching people sort of pass the other side, and you don't know what happens to them. And so I did. And at the time, I had to do this issue of Commandy. I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make that about life. So I did an issue of Commandy where that's exactly what happened. Commandy is stuck in a room. And he doesn't know why, but sort of he's with a group of people, and every few days one of them gets pulled out, and he doesn't know where they go or why, and he sort of has to deal with it was just a metaphor for life, but it was just totally stolen from that movie.
That's fantastic. Also, for comic fans, basically the first issue of Daredevil and the fate of Jack Murdoch is pretty much the setup.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because it's Ryan plays a fighter that is asked to, take a dive.
Take a dive, yeah.
Yeah, to allow this young up-and-coming contender to build on his record. And, Ryan's kind of broken down, doesn't have the greatest record. And, yeah, it becomes kind of this, like, crisis of conscience in terms of his own self-respect versus making an easy buck, falling to this guy. And it's all done in real time, which is amazing. It's like a 71-minute movie, and it all takes place like you're seeing it as it like unfolds. And it's a great movie. And Robert Wise, the director, I always say Robert Wise is one of the most unsung Hollywood directors. And some people say, and I've talked about this with Gabe, because Gabe's a big film buff too, and he's like, well, that's because he couldn't like decide on a style. And I said, I disagree. And I'm like, no, that just means he was versatile, because he did that movie, he did The Sound of Music, he did The Day the Earth Stood Still. He's if you look at the body of films that he did the first Star Trek, the motion picture, he did that film. It's incredible, the body of work and just the different things he could do. And they're all incredible. I mean, honestly, even Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which isn't a perfect movie, I think it's not his fault. It just got bogged down by the special effects. It's he's an amazing director, and truly, the setup I think is his absolute classic. So he was Wells' editor for Kane and for Magnificent Ambersons.
I agree.
So,
if you haven't seen the setup, you should see it. It's tense and good and dirty and wonderful.
Yeah, totally. And and again, covering boxing as I did for a long time in print and on radio, if you go to like a local show, it pretty much, it's a little over dramatic in terms of the crowd, but kind of not that much different than what actually happens. And just you get kind of the bloodlust of the fans. It's incredible. It's an amazing movie. And Robert Ryan, again, much like Robert Wise, vastly underrated actor. I love Robert Ryan.
Yes, Robert Ryan is amazing.
Good stuff, man. There you go, King. We can wrap if you'd like. We can keep going. It's up to you.
I want to at least talk a little bit about Stan Lee. I feel like we have to.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And we have in the past, and you've talked about your encounters, but certainly with Stan's passing.
No, I wanted to take issue with you because I heard your wonderful podcast the day after Stan passed, with
Fred Van Lent.
With Fred. Which I thought was perfect and exactly what I wanted that day. And
thanks, man.
Thank you for putting that out. But I was yelling at the podcast because I felt that I felt like you were almost too caveating his accomplishments.
Interesting. Go on.
And it's hard to say he's underrated at this point, because I think in pop culture he's overrated to the sort of average person, and his reception at death, you couldn't ask for more than that. If you're thinking about like Herodotus saying you judge a man by his death and how people talk about him, like Stan Lee won the game, right?
No question.
He's so appreciated. But I feel like among comic book fandom, or among sort of the super nerds that we are, there was always this sort of like, yeah, but kind of attitude for him, he, there's the Jack stuff and the Steve stuff, and and they like you go back to his original sin of whether he got Jack fired from Marvel and all that, and so there was so much butting. I feel like he didn't get enough credit almost for what he did. Just looking at, because I've read so much of his stuff, and I've read so much of Kirby's stuff without him, and Ditko's stuff without him.
Sure.
And so I think, like, you can't ever say that he created the things that the bad newspapers say that he created Spider-Man. Obviously, those were not his own creation. But I think it is legitimate to say that he created the Marvel universe. I think
Agreed.
That is a legitimate statement. That his work that he didn't create any single character, but the concept of that universe and the feel of it and that part of that legacy does sort of belong to him in a bigger way.
I agree with you. Absolutely. No, and I welcome counterpoints to what Fred and I tried to do. That show literally fell in our laps because I was going to talk to Fred about a couple of his current works that he has out there, and then we got the word that Stan passed away, and I think we even talked about it on the podcast. He's like, hey, can I come on in a half hour later because I got to go on BBC Radio and talk about Stan? I'm like, sure. I'm like, I get it. And then, again, he wrote the comic book history of comics. So I thought, oh, he's a comic book historian. And yeah, again, complicated guy, but no, you're 100% right. And you're right. That connectivity of the Marvel universe should not be ignored. And clearly probably was a Stan device of all of a sudden Thor flying over the Daily Bugle for a second and just that kind of appearance or a mention of what's going on in another comic book,
But I just like as in what I mean, there's many things that amaze me about Stan Lee, but just looking back, like, okay, so he's the editor at Marvel Comics. So his lineup of artists was basically Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and Don Heck, which
sure,
right?
Yeah,
that is a
Dick
lineup.
Ayers.
And Dick Ayers, that's like a lineup for the ages, right?
Agreed, absolutely.
But it's not the greatest. I don't think it's the greatest lineup of artists in the history of comics or the history of comics that were available to editors. Like I just read a huge Infantino, and he pointed out that in the beginning of DC Comics, Infantino, Toth, and Joe Kubert were sort of the young guns, and they were sort of considered the heart of it. And I was like, if I had to put up Kirby, Ditko, and Heck or Ayers against those three, I was like, that's a pretty even match. Like I feel like those, just in terms of my own personal tastes, but you never got the genius out of those people at DC that they got the genius out of the people at Marvel. That's and I feel like there's something, and then because I was thinking about like editors that had worked with, like the best editors working with the top talent. I was like you could think of like the EC Times with like Kurtzman and Gaines.
Will Elder, absolutely,
and Feldstein, and like
Johnny Craig.
Yeah, so when you have like, you've got Wally Wood and Al Williamson, like who'd be the third, like Kamen.
Roy Krenkel, maybe Roy Krenkel or somebody like that.
Yeah. To me, I like Jack Kamen better than Roy Krenkel. But like those, but like like those artists are, I think, as good as. Maybe not as imaginative, but I mean, I think they had just as much potential. But even though they didn't get out of those what Stan got out of his artists and his thing, and those artists without Stan, so to me, like his legacy as an editor and as a chief and as a spokesperson, I don't know. I think he did something unique and to be appreciated for all time there. Like just in terms of he's like the greatest comic book editor of all time. Sort of
interesting, yeah.
Rather than just look at him as the greatest sort of comic book writer of all time, he's probably one of the top 10 writers of all time, but he's definitely the greatest editor of all time, which I think might be even more important.
I completely agree with you, and I think that's an excellent point to make. No question. I mean, he changed the language of comics to the point where DC was trying to figure out what Marvel was doing, and every time they couldn't get to the basic point of no, they're just really well made, And it was so funny as they would try and figure it out. And it took a really long time for them to catch up again with Marvel. I mean, a lot of those late Silver Age comic books at DC, I love them. They're fascinating to me, but they're not the best comics. And meanwhile, Marvel was doing its, some of its finest work. So yeah, I hear you, man. And also working under the handicap of having to be distributed by DC's distributor
yeah.
and only being able to put out literally 8 comics a month. And that's why we got Tales of Suspense and, the other Journey into Mystery and stuff that would be a half Iron Man, half Captain America, or half Hulk and half Submariner, and the things that they did back in the day. Pretty amazing, man.
And to do it when you're 39, right? Like that's when Fantastic Four came out. Like,
Yep.
I know now. That's basically the age I am now. And to redo your entire and to have, not to like start a new career and do it as best you can. To have written comics for 20 years and then hit your peak,
Sure. No, like, as a middle-aged man, it's very reassuring.
Yes.
It truly, I believe me, I feel the same way. And it's like, yeah, it's, because again, I think younger people do think, 40, man, I'll probably be, done or whatever, or nothing new to happen. It's like, not if you don't want it to be, man. You can reinvent yourself and find new challenges. And again, to do it back then was incredible. I agree with you.
You read, because I've read a lot of New God stuff for Mr. Miracle, and it's brilliant. It is the most. You're looking at the greatest mind in the history of comics is Jack Kirby, but he's not the greatest on his own. He's not the greatest storyteller in the history of comics.
I agree. No, he's a clunky writer. He was a clunky writer.
He's a and dude, if I was doing as many comics and work as he was doing, I would not do as well as he did. Obviously, I wouldn't do I'd do 1% as well as he did.
I love that volume of his war stories with the Losers, the original Losers.
Oh, me too. He's so good.
And it really, that to me is like one of the most personal Kirby productions that he ever made, and I find that incredibly fascinating. I was going to say earlier when you were talking about how you seek out old action comics from the 40s, when I go through the dollar bins, I'm always looking for DC war books and DC Western books, and also the weird stories as well. Not as big of a horror fan, but I love all that stuff, and I truly like the war books were so great, really, through the end of the run. There was never a jump the shark moment in any of those books. GI Combat and everything. Oh, so good.
Well, I'm Alex Toth obsessed these days. That's my new obsession.
I can appreciate that. Torpedo.
That's what I was going to. Yeah, Torpedoes. Yeah.
No, Toth was incredible. Oh my God.
I can't. He's. I feel like he's almost like Orson Welles, where he never could, because he doesn't have a masterpiece. I mean, I guess Orson Welles has one masterpiece that's like all his, but Toth could never sort of settle down on one thing. He'd just do like an issue here and be like, here's how brilliant I am, but I'm mad at my editors. I'm never writing again. Then he'd come back 2 weeks later. Dude.
I loved in Alter Ego when he would correspond with Roy Thomas.
Yeah.
And they would print them, and they would print them. They would show you the envelope because he would have notes on the envelope and even a little like stupid sketch of a duck or something like that. No, he was fascinating, and yeah, I agree. And truly, I'm looking at one of my favorite Chris Samnee pieces that I have on my wall, and his Toth influence, I really respect.
Yeah, Samnee's the best. Come do some Batman, Samnee. Damn it.
That would be cool.
That
would be very, very cool. Yeah, I always wonder what, I know he's taking a break. I'm like, all right, what are you going to do next, man? This is going to be interesting. So
that's the problem with artists when they start writing for themselves. It's a horrible plague. We should stop this from happening.
Are you doing okay with the double shipping, or is it maddening?
It is maddening. I'm doing okay with it. Yeah, I'm perfectly balanced, but then I'm doing this Hollywood stuff now, which is knocking me off balance.
Yeah.
So the thing that was proceeding before keeps proceeding, and we'll see how that goes.
Can you give us any more detail on the Hollywood stuff beyond your Beverly Hills Hotel?
Yeah. So
adventures?
I'm doing this. I don't talk about this a lot, but I don't care. Because I'm sure this will all fall apart, so I'll get to tell you about it eventually, and I'll write a great graphic novel like Bendis did about it.
That's right.
So I'm writing a TV show with a big old movie star, who's co-writing it with me, sort of, and also starring in it. And so we went out to Hollywood a big studio bought it. So now we're getting paid, which is always nice to get actual money. So a movie studio bought it. So then we went out to Hollywood to shop it around all the basically all the streaming services and all those.
Sure.
And so we had a bunch of meetings where we sort of went for a week and pitched the TV show to the executives at the TV stations, was basically what happened. And it was surreal. Like you're sitting there and you're in like the AMC lobby, and the head of AMC is there, and you're just like looking at all the Mad Men Emmys they have and all the Breaking Bad Emmys, and you're like, let me tell you what our TV show, like, how do you impress these people? Like, it's surreal. And then you do Netflix, and Netflix is just like its own little monster. A wonderful monster, but the Netflix lobby was again full of more movie stars than I'd seen. Like the stars of their shows were wandering around, and the Netflix lobby in LA, there's a screen that's the size of a house. It's like some fancy, and it's like and it's always showing their shows, and it like surrounds this room. And then you go back to pitch a TV show, you go back into, they have like a series of offices. It's not like just one little office because so many TV shows pitch them every single day of their lives. So there's like a series of pitch rooms, and each one is named after a different TV show that's successful on their network and painted with that sort of style that way. So we were in the Kimmy Schmidt room.
Hilarious. I love that show.
And you go in there and you sit down with the movie star and you pitch your show, and we'll see. What one network bought it in the room, so at least someone bought it. And then so the other networks are, there's like a bidding stuff for it. But again, this is Hollywood, and it will all fall apart. Just so you guys know, I know and I'm aware that you will never see any of the work I'm doing on this.
Well, yeah, based on the conversations I had with Bendis and stuff, it's always like, until I actually see it on a TV, I'll believe it when, it's not real until you actually finally see it on a screen. And
it is 100% not real at all. This is all just fantasy.
Hey, no, but, I'm not surprised that the attention is there. Sheriff of Babylon, I think, would make an incredible streaming show or cable show. Truly, one of the things I got into with Brian Hill was how fascinating today's Hollywood is, the options that are there, the ability to tell long-form stories, and also that kind of, it's interesting, the people that are complaining about where the movies are, like Coppola saying, well, they don't want movies anymore, they want carnival rides, and Jodie Foster complaining earlier this year that I can't make the kind of movies I used to make anymore in Hollywood. And it's like, well, maybe not on the big screen, but you can certainly take it to a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or a Hulu or the like. And if you're willing to go from $20 million a movie to maybe $5 million for making this, sorry if that's slumming, but I think you'd be creatively satisfied. The Kaminsky Method, that amazing show. Did you see it on Netflix?
I haven't seen it. I don't have time to watch any of these. I'm so far behind on everything.
Hey, Tom,
I have 3 children, and all I'm doing is watching stupid old noirs.
Yeah, but good for you, Tom, because truly that means you're working and generating stuff rather than, dicking around watching things. But that Kaminsky Method with Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin, it's great. It would have been a great independent movie and a great comedy, independent comedy. But that said, it's even better because it's 8 episodes of around a half hour each, and it's this fantastic story, and you really get much deeper into the characterizations of the characters of these people, more so than you would in even a 2-hour movie, because obviously it's twice the time. But it's rich, it's interesting, it's funny, and it's like, that's fine. The game has transferred from the big screen to these streaming services, but I think in a much more richer storytelling way. So I don't see it as a bad thing. And especially a guy like Coppola, as Hill and I were pointing out to each other, there's one of the original mavericks that changed the status quo of movie making in the 60s in the studio system. And for him to complain where motion pictures are today, it's like, wow, I kept saying it's like they should bring, like when Bendis brought the X-Men of the 60s to the modern era. And it's like, I would love for Maverick Francis Ford Coppola to hear what you're saying right now. And I have a feeling he'd slap you for saying, like, dude, did you forget who we were? Did you forget what we were doing? It's like, that's fine. This is, let things change. And it's interesting. I just got my SAG screeners, or I got notification, I should say, of what screeners I'm getting for SAG. And not only do we get, it's insane. I mean, truly, took this new radio job, and the last thing I expected was suddenly to become a member of the Screen Actors Guild, but here I am. And it's great. I get to vote for the awards, which is hilarious.
That's awesome.
And we get the film screeners and also the television screeners. And yeah, I was just going over the list, and it's funny because usually I'll take them with me and have like a DVD movie night or TV night with my cousins who don't have things like Netflix or didn't see one of the movies. Last year it was Darkest Hour. My cousin's a huge history buff, so we watched Gary Oldman playing Winston Churchill, and he loved it.
I'm reading a Winston Churchill biography right now.
Oh, fantastic, man. I'm a huge fan. No, I think it's a great time in media, and truly and I'm really happy for friends like you that have great creative ideas and that Hollywood is listening. So whatever happens, I'm sure it's not the last bunch of Hollywood meetings you will ever have. So,
but it's I never know if it's. I love writing comics like with all my heart, and I never know if it's worth it. Like you write a TV series, you work on that for 2 to 3 years of your life. It comes out, and I feel like people pay attention to it for a week, and then it kind of goes away. Like Sean Penn was in a TV series this year, nobody noticed.
That's right. It was that astronaut show or whatever.
Yeah, some space. Yeah, an astronaut show. Or whatever. It's
on Hulu.
Yeah. You can dedicate years of your life to a show. Whereas a comic book, the audience is smaller, but I think you can make something that lasts and makes an impact almost just as much. I feel like sometimes, or at least to me, it matters as much to me.
I hear what you're saying, and I do think that we're at a slightly oversaturation of all the streaming services. But I also think that, again, at least these people are getting the opportunity to make these shows. And, just like any other kind of media, there's great shows. There's not such great shows.
Yeah.
Jeff Daniels did that show where he was Richard Clark. He wasn't Richard Clark. He was another 9/11 intelligence specialist.
That's right, yeah. The tower.
Falling Tower or something? Yeah, Falling Tower or something, yeah.
Yeah, I read the book back in my CIA days, I forget, yeah.
There you go, man. Yeah, no, crazy stuff. I'd love to get into politics, but I also don't want to keep you up, so we can, I'm fascinated by the current scene. I mean, I can't help it, and looking with interest to see how things unfold.
I think unfold is how things break. Everything seems to be breaking apart.
Yes.
It's going to be wild. It's going to be wild.
Yeah, 2019 is going to be a very interesting year politically. I agree. Very, very, very interesting times, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. I think that's the best way to put that.
The blessing and the curse of interesting times, no question. So, well, the good news is interesting comic books from Tom King, and they continue to be. And I'm glad you're experimenting. I see it in the Superman story in Walmart. The Batman stuff continues to fascinate, and this rabbit hole that we're going down with Bruce is pretty amazing. And truly, man, I think about, you had the tough assignment of following Scott Snyder.
It's very hard to follow Scott Snyder. He's a very charismatic guy, and he's
a wonderful writer. Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
No, you're in the same position that Brad was when he was following Kevin Smith on Green Arrow. And it was like, oh, look at this. Isn't this interesting? But then times 50 or 100 when you're finished with your run. But, I mean, I'm telling you, this is great. From Once a Crowded Sky, when I met you with Tom Fowler, to where you are now, it's been a pleasure watching the evolution of Tom King.
Tom Fowler has to come back and do some Batman. That guy's a genius.
That's a great idea. That's a wonderful
Actually, no, I take that back. Tom Fowler needs to go and make Mad Magazine again. Tell him I said that.
I have a little hope because Bill Morrison, the wonderful guy that was with Matt Groening, Futurama, and the like, running Mad Magazine these days. So I fingers crossed that Mad will find its way back to being pertinent again. Who was I just talking to about Mad? And I bought Dick DiBartolo's book about Mad and about how Gaines would take, these incredible trips with his staff all around the world.
Yeah, to visit the Haiti guy, that's the favorite.
Yes, the one subscriber of Mad Magazine in Haiti. Can you imagine that being like at your house and Bill Gaines and all these Don Martin and all these people show up at your door, Sergio Aragonis? We should ask Sergio about that sometime.
You should have Sergio on this. Oh, can I tell you a Stan Lee?
It's been forever. I know. I got to get Sergio back. Go on.
Can I tell you a Stan Lee story that I didn't hear anyone telling?
Oh, please. Absolutely. No, of course.
This isn't my story, and I'm going to screw it up, but I'm going to tell it anyways. So I went to dinner with Joe Giella. Do you know who that is?
Yes, of course. A wonderful Silver Age inker.
Yes, Silver Age inker. Yeah. So he's 91 now. If you see him, he just started doing cons again. Because he was drawing Mary Worth for the last 30 years.
Wow. Romance comic strip for people who don't know who Mary Worth is. Go on.
Yeah, now drawn by June Brigman, who used to be the Powerback artist.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. That's amazing.
Joe's doing cons again, so I saw him and I was like, I gotta take this guy out to dinner. So we started going out to dinner. So he's amazing, sharp as a tack. And I mean, this is the guy who he inks the Flash of Both Worlds cover. He inked Pirate Showcase 4. I mean, he's seen it all and done it all, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
And he sells. So if you see him at a con, bring $500. He sells the best sketches ever seen, and this is buying a piece of history. So buy a sketch from Joe Giello. It's my 100% recommendation. I have one up on my wall, and it is gorgeous because he did a Silver Age Green Lantern with Gil Kane, so I have that.
That's fantastic! Oh my God, that's wonderful. Go on.
So Joe was telling me, so he was saying this is 1946. So he's 16 or so. I'm gonna get the dates. I'm gonna get everything about this story wrong, and he's gonna tell me I told it wrong. But this is what I remember him telling me. I took with Joe and the Simonsons. We all went to dinner in Baltimore. The Simonsons are the best people in the world. So
yes, indeed, wonderful couple.
Yes, and Walt Simonson is my personal hero, and I want to be him when I grow up. So Joe was telling the story. He was and this is the way he was 16, and he was an artist and had gotten like a few minor gigs, and he finally got a gig at Atlas Timely, whatever pre-Marvel was.
Sure.
And his dad had lost his job, and the way he described it, he said there were literal house payments coming in that weren't going to be made if he didn't draw this well. So he did all his time as a teenager. He drew this whole story up. And he went to time with Stan, gave him the story, gave him the script, and he drew it up for Stan. And he lived in Long Island, took the train to Manhattan, got off the train to go give this stuff to Stan, and looked behind him and realized he had left all the art on the train.
Oh my God!
And it was his first gig it was his first breakout gig. The mortgage of his parents' house was flying away in a subway. And he collapsed to his knees and just like tears on his face. He's like, I failed everyone. And he's like, now I'm gonna have to go and tell this boss who is depending on me to get this book out that I fucked up the gig and I can't make payment. And he went to Stan, and so I guess Stan had come back from the war, so just in that kind of era. And he fully expected Stan to be like, you ruined this comic, you're fired, you can never work for me. And Stan was like, all right, we're going to solve this problem. I'm going to call this guy. We're going to get in the room. We're going to get this done tonight. And we're going to get you paid. And
wow.
Yeah. And so rather than sort of berating him, Stan sort of saved him and made sure he could make that payment for his dad and could get his house, and like got his whole career started. And it's like a young, beautiful. This is 20 years before, or 15 years before the Fantastic Four. And he sort of saved little Joe Giello, who's still around.
That's amazing.
That's just like a nice little Stan being a mensch story from a long time.
Absolutely, man, 100%. No, that's beautiful, man.
And I'm sure so get Joe on so he'll tell the actual correct version of that, not the hyperbole version. But that's what I'm
gonna have to see if I can find contact info for Joe. I would love to have Joe on.
Oh, I have his email. I'll get it to you.
Oh, that'd be great. Joe Sinnott was at Terrificon in Connecticut.
I'm going this year. Terrific.
You going to Terrificon?
Yeah. I heard you talk about it. I was jealous and I wanted to go, so I told my con agent we're doing
Tom, I swear to God, it's a great show, and Mitch is a terrific guy who runs the con, and we will have a blast, I'm telling you, and we will do wonderful panels. And I'll tell you off the air, someone who they Mitch emailed me, and he said, by the way, I just talked to Creator X, a classic Silver and Bronze Age creator, and he's like, I told him that you'd be moderating his panel, and he said okay. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was truly, and I mean, really, like I said, you heard the panels because you listen. I mean, even the one, and that I didn't even host, the one that Paul Kupperberg did with Barbara Freelander about DC Romance.
That was amazing. That was a really
holy shit. Howard Chaykin loved that panel. Howard's like, I can't believe that was incredible. I'm like, yeah. So no, it truly very quickly became one of my absolute favorite cons. I'm very grateful that Mitch Halleck, the guy who runs Terrificon, likes what I do because he had never heard of me. Franco vouched for me, and then he listened to a couple word balloons. He's like, "Oh, you're perfect for this show. You can do as many panels as you want." And like on Saturday, I did like 4 in a row. And I'm just like, oh my God, I feel like Cronkite on like one of the space missions, like not leaving the news desk for like 8 hours or whatever. But it was great. Oh my God, and the Robin panel just cracked me up. and you had like Denny shitting on the idea, the concept of Robin.
And Seeley called me after that, and he's like, I was on this panel. Everyone hated Robin but me.
It's true. I know Seeley and I at the airport were drinking at the bar before our plane, and he's like, you had a bunch of little kids in there that love Robin, and it really wasn't cool that all these old men were hating on Robin. And I'm just like, there's a little 8-year-old kid in a Tim Drake outfit, but I like Robin. Yeah, it was great. Jim Starlin and Roy Thomas talking about total inside
I watched
baseball.
that, and I watched the YouTube video you put up too.
The video is great. Yeah, it was these other guys that made the video and everything. But oh my God, I was just thrilled to be in the room while these guys were telling these amazing stories. The Infinity Gauntlet panel. No, these truly, he gets great men and women that, both the modern era and the classic era. I'm so glad you're going because we'll have a blast, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. All right, King, I'll let you go.
All right, thank you, John. Thank you, all the word balloons, and thank you especially to the Batman readers because we're going through. It's a huge story, and you're at the middle of the second act when Batman's in a lot of trouble. So thank you for sticking with this, and I promise you the light is coming, but it's going to be pretty blinding.
Pretty amazing stuff, man. No, what you're doing with Batman, and again, that Superman stuff for the Walmart comics is just fantastic and worth the trek. If a Walmart is not immediately accessible, make it your mission to track these issues down because Tom's telling a hell of a story there. Heroes in Crisis continues to confound and entertain, and I think that's terrific as well. And, of course, if you didn't read Mr. Miracle, there's a nice fever dream waiting for you of 12 issues.
Trey's out in February.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Is it going to be in 2 parts, or is it the full 12 issues?
Full 12 issues. With Norton. Norton opens the whole thing up.
That's right.
So,
excellent.
So the trade will have a little preamble that Mike Norton and Jordi Belair and I did together to sort of explain who the new gods are before it starts.
Absolutely. Very cool. Thanks, Tom. Happy Christmas and best to the family.
No, happy Christmas to you.
And yeah, we'll check in a couple months when things get interesting and talk more with Tom King and another word balloon marathon. Thank you, dude.
Look forward to it.
Great fun as always with my buddy Tom King, another guy that reached out while I was stuck in the hospital for a month and making sure I was okay. We had a great conversation after the one you just heard. But terrific. There's a few more episodes in the can that I'll be putting out in the days and weeks ahead. Really great stuff. Chris Iliopoulos is coming up, as I said last week, regarding my conversation with Brad Meltzer. We're going to get into his and Brad's upcoming PBS cartoon that is based on the I Am books. I Am Sonia Sotomayor and I Am Neil Armstrong, among the more recent children's illustrated books that Chris draws and Brad writes. Fun stuff, and the PBS cartoon sounds great. And Chris also was really the big proponent, as you heard in my conversation with Brad, to do I Am Neil Armstrong. So we certainly get into a little NASA jag with Chris. It's great catching up with Chris. And we talk about lettering and the work he does in general at Marvel and with Savage Dragon. So always a pleasure to talk to Chris Iliopoulos. We're also going to have a great conversation with Dennis Kitchen. And, man, I am so excited to share this conversation with you. Dennis Kitchen of Kitchen Sink Press, the great underground cartoonist. You might know him as the literary agent for Will Eisner. He was the caretaker of Will's last several stories and also is the keeper of the Eisner estate. And he really gives us this amazing history of underground comics. You know, Robert Crumb, Harvey Pekar, the whole industry. I mean, really Dennis was there at the beginning. And Kitchen Sink Press was a very important publisher. How did it work? How did they get their books to these places? You know, they were sold at, like, drug paraphernalia stores, head shops. You know, what was going on there? And how did he manage to, do this? And, did he have to have other jobs? It's a great inspirational story about creator-owned comics being done in the 60s and 70s and beyond. Really, I can't tell you how excited I was about this conversation. And then when it happened, I was so thrilled. And the only thing that's been keeping it from getting to you guys was me being stuck in the hospital for a month. So very excited. That's coming next week here on Word Balloon. Can't wait to share it with you. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Again, brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. If you enjoy Word Balloon's free. It'll always be free. But if you want to help out the cause, you can do that by subscribing to Word Balloon via Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the Patreon ad on the front page of wordballoon.com, and that portal, that will get you to our Patreon portal. But really, do you like Word Balloon? Do you think it's worth the price of a comic a month? Do you think it's worth $1 a month even? If you do, if you're able to afford it, I know it's a tough time, but the funds are greatly appreciated and help Word Balloon move forward and continue to evolve. Thank you very much, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics, the industry's fastest-growing independent publishing company. They have declared this year, 2019, as the year of reading dangerously. They've got great stuff coming up this year, things like Stronghold with my buddy Phil Hester and the great Ryan Kelly, a new series by Ryan Parrott featuring Oberon of Shakespearean legend, and of course, just legend itself. Dark Red, a very cool vampire living in rural America story from Tim Seeley, and other books too like Out of the Blue and Horde are coming later this year as well. Now, in the weeks ahead, we'll be talking to some of these creators about their books from Aftershock. You don't have to wait, though, because there already are full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books and more to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Again, thanks for listening. More coming in just a few days. Have a great weekend, and looking forward to talking to you next week with another new Word Balloon conversation. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2019.